Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 39 of the MC Lars podcast. This is part 2 of my 2-part series on the dead Milkmen. It is Memorial Day, May 27th, 2019, and today I talk with Rodney Anonymous. So Rodney's from Coatesville, Pennsylvania. His parents were Sex Pistols fans, and we talk a lot about on this podcast the origins of the dead Milkmen, but also something that's always fascinated me about Rodney is his love and appreciation of music of all genres. We talk about the origin of the word punk. The band Suicide, he said, first used it. And what I always love about Rodney is he's a really great storyteller, and he's someone who will forever stay young because of his passion and curiosity for music and the world. We talk about each Dead Milkmen album's name and where it came from, and he gives me a little story behind each one, which is kind of cool. He tells a story about the time him and Schoolie D got kicked out of a recording studio for signing a golden record on the wall that wasn't theirs. And he talks about the time Green Day opened for the Dead Milkmen, and he talks about Eastern State Penitentiary and doing the Punk Rock Girl video and how he kind of was bored on the set and wandered around and then went home early and how it was like a boring shoot for him. He also talks about Dave and funny stories about him and how his death, when he first heard about it, he thought was like the ultimate prank. We also go into something I don't really talk about is my love of industrial gothic music, which kind of inspired me to fall in love with synths and, programming and all that. So we talk about all of these deep bands that we both appreciate. So it gets pretty heavy on the goth industrial love. So that's what's up. This episode is brought to you by the following Patreon supporters. Shout out to Allison, Megan, and Tina. Thank you so much. They recently signed up. And shout out to some of the OGs, Aaron, Robert, and Chris. Enjoy. It's really great to talk to some legendary icons of Philadelphia music, and Rodney was no exception. So enjoy. It is part 2 of my Dead Milkmen series. So we had Joe Jack last week, and today, yes, we had to do it. Rodney Anonymous. What's up, buddy?
Why does Joe get to go the week before me? What am I, chopped liver? Maybe we'll go by and get Rodney. I don't know.
We're I did alphabetically.
What?
J, then R.
Anonymous comes before
Okay.
talcum.
So
A before T, except after C, is the mathematical rule.
we're in South Philadelphia, and Rodney has kindly put out this beautiful...
Well, my wife put out the spread.
Okay, Vienna.
Because she's from South Philly, and that's what you do when people are coming. And I mean anybody, like the mailman, some homeless guy comes walking down the street. Hey, you, here. That's the way we should be for homeless people.
You guys, that's why you don't have any food in the house. You feed everyone.
No, when I was a kid, we didn't have food in the house. We have food in the house now that I'm an adult, but when I was a kid, there was no food in my folks' house. And we could call my folks right now, and they go, yeah, that's pretty much right. There was no food.
I kind of just want to call them now, but...
I know. It would be so awesome just to put them on the phone. Like, they back everything up. I had to do that from work, because I would tell stories from work, because my mom was a kleptomaniac. Probably still is. I'm a bit of a kleptomaniac. I'm a little bit better.
Yeah.
But if it's not nailed down, it's mine. And my mom once stole a really fancy teapot from somewhere by putting it under her dress and pretending to be pregnant. Now, I told this story somewhere, and everybody's like looking at me like they don't believe it's true. So I call up, Mom, did you steal it? Oh, yeah, I stole that. Yeah. I was like, she's patting her belly going like, oh, any day now.
You
a horrible family I have.
You grew up in steel mill town?
It was a steel town. It was my father worked for the steel mill, and it's really I say I grew up in one of the last vestiges of feudalism in the world. It was the town owned everything.
Yeah.
And not so much as when I was growing up, although basically you had like 5 or 6 rich families and everybody else was fairly poor. Everybody else, your folks worked at the steel mill like my dad did, although there was a lot of, and by the time we got to the 70s and stuff, there was a lot of layoffs. The steel mill wasn't as prevalent. But in the 1930s, 20s and 30s, in order to keep people from unionizing, because you had this vast workers' rights movement, they put up towers. And the towers had lights on them, and they would just shine the lights around to make sure that you weren't allowed to meet in groups of more than like 3 people because that's a union meeting, and then goons would come over. Yeah.
So while they're working, they'd shine the lights on them.
While they're working. This was
just in the town.
At night, there were towers with lights on them.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
And that would like when you hear this stuff, that it really does influence your writing.
What's the town called?
Coatesville.
Okay, and
Yeah.
then when did you move to Philadelphia?
I moved to Philadelphia I dropped out of college in my early 20s.
Okay.
And moved to Philadelphia. Hide from my parents. I didn't want them to know I dropped out of college. And they were pretty, I was like the first male in my family ever to go to college.
Yeah.
And we've been here since like the 1600s. So that's a pretty big accomplishment. Like not to have anybody else in the family for like 300 years go to college. So
wait, so your family was like some of the first generation?
No, not really. No, there were people here before. They were that part of the sort of Germans that came over and into eastern Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And I've been in the Philadelphia, the main library has all the ship records. So my ancestor, Johannes, came over on the Loyal Judith, and I think like 1690. So they're when they start doing the early censuses even before it's the United States, they turn up in the early censuses. One of my ancestors had one of the first illegitimate children in Pennsylvania. Yeah, yeah.
So
see, stealing teapots, that's a step up. Yeah, technically, yeah.
So
they were horse thieves too. I forgot to mention that.
The Linderman family was horse thieves as well. So you come from a long line of rapscallions.
Yeah, I do. A long line of scallywags.
And so you
charged with scallywagism.
You dropped out of college. What were you studying?
Political science. Political science major, public administration minor.
Okay. And that was, what year was that you moved to Philadelphia?
I would have probably come to Philadelphia in 83 or 84. Completely different city then than it is now. It's weird. My office now at work is out my windows where they built the new Comcast building. And it's just, there were no new buildings then. It was gloriously depressing. I loved it. In my memories, it's always winter. So it's like it is outside now, except there's nothing to do. There's never anything to do. So you had to make your own. People formed bands and have parties because we literally had nothing to do. Nobody came through. Occasionally there'd be a punk rock show. And you didn't know if you were going to exit that alive. And it wasn't because of the people at the show. It's because, the people in the area would just see like a mohawk. Now it's weird. I work with people who have green hair and come in with green and purple hair, and the companies are fine with that. But back then it was a death sentence.
Right. That was the counterculture then.
Yeah, that was,
the misunderstood
that was the under the counterculture. That wasn't even the counterculture. You had to whisper, and the guy would reach under the counter and he would give you some of that culture.
When do you remember first just hearing punk rock for the first time?
Oh my God. My parents, I guess the first official punk rock, my parents, the Sex Pistols would come to America and they were on the news and my parents saw them and fell in love with them. Parents, because my parents have been rockers in the 50s. Yeah. And they hated hippies and they hated like long jammy music, like Pink Floyd for my parents would have been, and I like a lot of Pink Floyd, but they, for them, that would have been a death sentence. And they just didn't like that sort of stuff. So what they liked was, people in leather jackets with short hair, banging out quick songs. So they're watching TV and the Pistols are being interviewed and they're being rude. This guy's just horrified by the Pistols. Right. He's like, we found porno mags and they said that they wouldn't do an interview unless we gave them bleeping $10. And my parents are laughing because they get the joke. They were working class people. This is funny to them. Yeah. And they were like, get down here and see us. My mom was a big Bowie fan and had seen Bowie in 74. So my sister got to go to that concert. And I got to go, I think it's 74. It may have been, the concert I might have been going to was 76. I'm 2 years younger than my sister. So once you reached 13 in my family, you were allowed to go to concerts. And usually my folks would come with you or they'd sit outside, and you come into Philadelphia and you go down to the Spectrum, they drop you off, you went in and saw the concert. So my sister got to see Bowie at the Tower when she was 13. With my mom went to that one. When I was 13, I got to see Yes in the round. That was think about that. Sister got to see Bowie at the Tower. That got recorded. I got to see Yes in the round. But Rick Wakeman playing the synthesizers, just, his rig and everything, it was a big influence on me. It's why I wear a cape on stage to this day.
Hey!
Big cape, yeah.
And why you rock the synthesizers.
Yeah, I totally, yeah.
So your parents were very informative on your musical loves and influences.
They were to a certain point. I think that they kind of... I think they kind of just stopped liking music, or they would lose interest and come back in, and I think that happens to just a lot of people. I know a lot of people I grew up with in the punk scene and stuff, and they just kind of lost interest in music. My parents, the same sort of thing. When they were young, they were the best thing musically is to be born at a time when something old is dying, or not to be born at a time, be in your late teens, maybe early 20s, or just any age where you're musically aware, probably from 11 on. Before 11, your tastes are pretty bad, I think, Like I had two sisters, and they had horrible taste in music. Like one liked Fleetwood Mac, and the other one liked Sean Cassidy, and I was stuck in the middle listening to the Dead Boys. But I was lucky because I hit that area. My folks had grown up just outside Philadelphia, so they were dancers on American Bandstand, and they grew up just as the Perry Como stuff was going out, and Elvis and Little Richard, really good, interesting rock and roll was coming in.
Yeah.
So they loved that, and that was on. And the weird thing was in Philadelphia, and that was on the radio. That was not on the radio in a lot of other places. Black music was not on the radio. They called it race music, and they would bring in Pat Boone to do his own version of Little Richard songs. And if you probably heard them, but like Pat Boone, what he does with those songs is horrible. He's like, long, tall Sally. Hey, she's long and lean. She's got everything that Uncle John. And you're like, kill me. But and Little Richard, oddly enough, had said at one point when he first heard Pat Boone doing Long, Tall Sally, he wanted to kill him. He actually got in his car and he had a gun and he was going to kill Pat Boone. But on his way down, he stopped at the mailbox and there was a check in the mailbox that he got money from Pat Boone singing. He's like, maybe I have some other songs Pat Boone would like to sing. So yeah,
that's a good story.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite. It's a great way to get the perspective on it. But yeah, I happen to be lucky enough that as that sort of classic rock was sort of dying. And punk was coming up, and that was really refreshing. I mean, when I can remember the first time I heard somebody had a thing of TVOD or just like really. First of all, I was a big Bowie fan, so the most influential things on me. I happened to be at the right age when Bowie put out his Berlin trilogy, and that was a big changer. But that was really stark and different, and there was all this other stark and different stuff coming around. So yeah. I hit a big lucky patch. I mean, when you first hear like Public Image Limited, so. I was, somewhere in high school, not quite college yet, when X, Black Flag, all that stuff is happening. So it's try to be born, try to luck it out. So you're born as, one thing is dying, and you can hop on the new thing.
What would that be now, like an intersection of something dying and something?
I think what's dying now is that sort of very friendly alt rock. The sort of like
Imagine Dragons.
Yeah. I try not to imagine them.
Hey!
Thank you.
Yeah, me neither.
I can't afford HBO, so I can't really see Game of Thrones. I have to imagine dragons. Thank you. I think that is on its way out, and I think I'm seeing, like I say, like Boy Harsher. Like all these sort of very. I'm really impressed by the fact that there's a band called Horror. That are amazing.
Oh, they're amazing.
They are horror. Have you seen them live yet?
No.
You've got to, I swear, next time, if you're in town, I'm in town, Horror in town, we're going to go see Horror. They're on the new Prodigy thing. You need to see them live. Live, again, I saw them in the basement of the Unitarian Church, which makes me wonder a lot about like the basic tenets of Unitarianism. Is there something, is they have a commandment where they have to have punk rock shows in the basement? But they came, it was I can't. Street Sex was opening from Austin, who are amazing, and I forget who else. I think Horror may have been on the same bill with Three Teeth. So I mean, that's a great show.
Yeah,
there were maybe 100 people there. I think since then, probably about 700 or 800 people have claimed to have been there for the show. But they Horror divide the crowd into two groups. Like everybody on this side. So I thought, this is how old I am and dumb. I thought, the singer's gonna run up and down between one of the singers. No, you divide them into two groups so we could run at each other like some medieval battle. I didn't know that. I was across from like this huge guy. I smacked into him. My friend Noah saw the whole thing, laughed his ass off. I just, and I was in slow motion. Like first I realized we're going to run at each other. I'm going to die. And my head starts doing all those calculations about like center of gravity, and after a while I just thought, no, it's just going to hurt. So yeah, but that was Horror. Absolutely amazing. Oh God, we just did a show with Youth Code. Youth Code are very in your face. I think right now, Lingua Ignota. Also, I think right now we're seeing the era of the angry female singer, which is fantastic. Right. Angry female musician, because as men we can get angry, but we can never get as angry as women can get angry, because women have to fight a lot of battles we don't have to fight. Like I don't understand why women just don't get up in the morning swearing. If I was a woman, I'd women of color, it's got to be like 1,000 times worse for them. I'm like an old white guy, and I'm angry, and I can't imagine if I was like, But But I see a lot of these, and I always try to. I really like it if we can get a band, at least one of the bands on a bill that has at least one female member. It's not a matter of like some sort of tokenism. It's a matter of I like to see when a young girl in the audience has somebody on stage she can relate to.
Yeah.
And we had a Rose Garden funeral party open for us in Dallas, and there was a young lady. A lot of people came and they bring their kids, which is weird for me, for our shows, but it's like older punks have kids. Oh, we'll take the kids. And Rose Garden were playing, and the young lady plays guitar, and there's a girl like strumming air guitar, and watching her, and Lana from Rose Garden, and she was just blown away. She's like, ooh. And what happened was the father was like, you want a guitar? You want? For those of you listening, I'm whispering and miming a lot. Yeah, that always helps on podcasts. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because that's the problem with rock is it's always been very male centered, and the guitar is like a phallic thing, and like
it's male centered. It's moved away from it used to be like super male centered, and then you begin to get people like even I guess Little Richard was the first sort of like foot in the door for something that wasn't sort of macho male centered, and then you got stuff like Freddie Mercury. You got you have people like that, and Elton John's great. Rock was willing to not pick on those people. They were icons. You couldn't have had a Boy George without those guys. And it's. But I think that begins to make a movement towards, and when I was young, my hero was Patti Smith. I wanted to be Patti Smith. Patti Smith was the toughest person I could think of.
That was an interesting thing. Talking to John Hall from King Missile about how he said the first time he felt comfortable with his masculinity was when he saw Patti Smith.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great line. Cool. Oh, I wish I'd said that.
Yeah.
Yeah. She changed everything. You saw her on TV when you saw female singers on TV. They put them in a dress. And they did, and this is one thing that kind of bothers me about alt rock. Because in alt rock, I don't like the infantilization of women, where you make them sing in that little girl voice. Like this. Women should be shouty and screamy because they have a lot to talk about, and in order to be heard, you have to be loud. And I think that, and so what. Like people don't understand now what a breath of fresh air someone like Patti Smith was, and it's weird. I'm glad John said that. I wish I got to talk to him more. I didn't get to hang out with him much because he showed up like super late in his show because he didn't know when it was going to start. I thought he was going to show up, hang out with everybody, and we get to talk to him a lot, but I didn't. But you got to talk to him, so vicariously, I can go back and listen to that interview, and just I'll fill it in. I'll take it. I'll chop it up. I'll just put me in there asking your question.
King Missile's been playing New York a lot these days, and it's kind of cool. He's had this like resurgence. You played with Sage Francis and in New York recently, and so John came out and did Take Stuff from Work.
Yeah, we did Bitch and Camaro, and I was shooting stuff back and forth with him. I'm like, John, why don't you put you on the guest list if you don't mind? Why don't you come out and do something? It'd be a nice treat for the audience who have paid too much to see us. And John was like, well, maybe I'll do this or I'll do that. Maybe I'll, and finally, like right before he went out, he goes, yeah, I'm going to Take Stuff from Work. I'm like, yeah, and he owned it. He came out and it was awesome. The audience is all pumped up. And it was great because there was this kid come out of nowhere like, all right, ladies and gentlemen, here's John Hall from King Missile. John Hall comes out, does that, and the audience is pumped and comes. And he's a tough act to follow. So it's a good thing I got to go into the whole, Bitch and Camaro thing because otherwise I don't think I could have followed that up with a ballad.
And what I've always loved about King Missile is that they've kind of always been in that, you could say, post-punk tradition. And Joe and I talked about this, that Dead Milkmen, he always felt like we're post-punk in that you took the energy of punk, but you did it in a unique style. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I've always gravitated, I think, more to post-punk. I liked hardcore bands. I liked punk bands. But to me, the more interesting stuff, to me, Echo and the Bunnymen are probably a little bit more interesting than the Pistols. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's that sort of thing. I'll probably get death threats for saying that. But, there was, punk itself lasted for maybe 2 years. And then the post-punk stuff came because people were influenced by it and began to say, punk opened the door. And then you begin to get people saying, oh, wait, I can do this and I can do that. I could name, I say you rattle off like 1,000 post-punk bands that I love. There's still a lot of great post-punk out there, but just punk just coming up and saying, and, Phil Oakey, which is a weird name because Phil Oakey should be the name of a country western singer. But Phil Oakey from the Human League was talking about, they said, it was the influence of the Damned and the Pistols where people were just saying, go and try, particularly the Damned. He said the Damned and the Clash. basically saying just go try it. You don't have to, because before that you had to play your instrument for decades and decades and get really, really good at it. And you had to, and these guys were just like, nah, I'm going to just cut right to having fun. So yeah, that's why I love the Damned. I'm a big Damned fan.
The Damned, aren't they credited as one of the first, if not the first punk band?
Yeah, I would say the first punk band to use the term punk was actually the American band Suicide. A band I love, and they basically they were a drum machine and organ and a guy just shouting stuff. And Suicide got Alan Vega from Suicide got an axe thrown at him on stage opening for the Clash because the audience didn't think they thought they were. I guess they were too punk for the punk crowd or whatever. But they came out and they're doing this noisy jam, and somebody actually threw an axe at him, and it was like coming at him in slow motion.
I mean, I've heard of Cutting Edge, but this is ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, he got hit with a tire.
How do you bring an axe into a show?
How do you get that into a show? Bouncers really didn't check back then.
Yeah, right.
But did they bring the axe? I have a lot of questions about the axe.
To grind.
Did they bring it for the Clash and just not like this band? Did the guy think? Because I knew clubs were tough, but the guy having to defend himself. How did they have a wood chopping job? I have a lot of questions. Like, well, somebody once threw we were on stage in Chicago and somebody threw a pineapple at Dave Blood, and we couldn't figure out where the hell the pineapple came from. Like we were more. I'm pretty sure it was Chicago where the pineapple came from. They was like, where the hell did the pineapple come from?
On Nantucket, the captains, the successful captains would have pineapples on their doors.
Yeah, we were talking about those gifts. Yeah, weird, because in the Philippines they have a tradition of a sack of rice as a gift. It's like the pineapple. It's like It's not nobody's excited about. It's just a traditional thing you give. But a friend of mine at work was telling somebody, it's like, oh, like you have any traditions for Christmas, and he said sack of rice, and the other guy thought he said a sacrifice, and it was like the most uncomfortable 3 hours until it got straightened out.
The sacrifice, that's Easter.
Yeah, that's Easter. Yeah, you want to do that on Easter. Yeah.
So I want to talk about later. We'll get into this more, but something you and I have bonded over a lot over the years is we both love Gothic industrial music.
I love Gothic industrial music,
and Poe
which is good because I'm married to a goth. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys.
I'd be in deep trouble if I did.
That's something we'll get into more. I want to start this interview with a story. So, 2011, this is how you and I connected. I did an interview when I was on Warped Tour, and someone asked me what I hoped one day maybe my legacy would be. And I said the biggest dream I could ever have would to be somehow be remembered as someone who was funny and original, who made quality music and loved by a group of people, kind of like the Dead Milkmen. That's my biggest dream.
I think you also said someone who's remembered as not selling out.
Not selling out,
which is important.
Yeah, that was part of it too. And you freaking emailed me, and I was on the bus on Warped Tour, like in Iowa or something, and I got an email from you that you'd seen this interview and that the shout out I gave you, and it was just like a defining moment that
Which was weird because I was familiar with your music before. I'd heard your stuff, and it's odd. Like I never make these connections that people I listen to might actually have listened to the stuff I do. Like MC Chris, there's nothing in my head that it ever said that. So
right.
So I thought, oh, this is great, and it was a super nice thing to say. And it's weird because you don't think anybody's going to see those, and
and
I've been saying nice stuff about Elvis for like the last 10 years, and he has never sent me an email saying, "Thank you, man. Thank you very much."
That's the thing, Rodney. Like it was like this cool moment for me that one of my heroes was reading what I had to say, and then we formed this friendship over the past 8 years.
Yes, it is a wonderful friendship.
And you have been on stage with me like countless times
with the Raven. Yeah,
and I've opened for you guys, and you brought me out with the Milkmen before in Philadelphia, and one time we were at the Edgar Allan Poe house.
Yes, when you tried to jump the fence
on Halloween
Tell
night.
the whole story.
And so we were...
All right. No, I'm telling it. So Dean and I take Lars to the Edgar Allan Poe house. We're all big Edgar Allan Poe fans. The house in Philly, by the way, they once let me go down to the basement there and record impulses to make reverbs out of.
Oh, right.
So I'm down in the basement smacking things, and people are walking around above hearing these noises come out of the basement in the Edgar Allan Poe house. And their people were cool with it. All right, so it was Halloween night. They're shutting it down. And Dean and I show you the house, but we can't get in there because it's closing for the night.
Yeah.
And we turn around, and you were attempting to go over the fence to the Edgar Allan Poe house, and we got you off the fence, and we quickly explained that that's federal property, and you go to federal prison, and the guys in federal prison are not there for jumping the fence at the...
Well, I wanted to get a picture...
Now they're there for working for Trump, I guess, but yeah.
I wanted to get a picture with the Raven statue.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I concur.
But I probably shouldn't have hopped the fence.
I would have... I've done stuff like that. Yeah.
And I was like, and I remember Dean was like, I'm out of here. I'm not trying to be affiliated. We have a show to play.
Yeah, I gotta go. I gotta. Somebody's got a drum. That's true. If anything happens to me, I mean, they can always find somebody to play keyboards and sing. But drummers are difficult to find. Yeah.
And you guys played on my Edgar Allan Poe EP. We redid the Raven song, which
and we did that Black Cat cover. I wish that would see the light of day.
We got to finish that.
Yeah.
I want to do a Edgar Allan Poe LP of all his other songs, stories. So that should go on that. That was tight. How did you meet Joe?
I went to high school with him, and he was. I think we sat in the same lunch table, and I don't think he spoke for a long, long time. And it was like a lunch table just full of weirdos. You know how like lunch, people are not allowed to sit with everybody else. And he was a little bit older than me, and there was it was weird. There's one guy who was like a cool guy in school, and he liked to hang out with us for reasons I could never understand. Maybe he just didn't realize how uncool we were. And then there was like a guy who was really wanted to be a minister and would just say weird things. So we would amuse ourselves listening to him and a couple other, just the outcasts of the world. And Joe had, I came in the school like right after Christmas break, 1979 going into 80 or New Year's break.
Yeah.
And I came in, so it's the 80s, and Joe had this tape of this band he called the Dead Milkmen, and had a song, it was called So Long 70s. Him and some other people just recorded this nonsense on New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
So they, I believe it was that was the official time for it. I know Joe and I played a show, I think, on New Year's Eve once, too.
That's what he said. That's the same story he told
Good.
me.
I'm glad it matches up, because he lies all the time. And I always have to clean up his mess. I'm like, he has lied about the name of the band. He said,
here's,
I don't want to say he's lied. He's taken liberties with the truth.
Do you want me to tell you what he said, or do you want to tell me
No,
the
I want to
truth?
hear what he said, because I can correct it. I have to actually go on podcast. I'll hear him on a podcast. I'll go on just to correct him.
So he said that the character of the character of Jack Talcum was the shadow Bob Dylan who formed a punk band.
It was a cross between Bob Dylan and John Lennon, because John Lennon was still alive at this point.
Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, wow.
And he had like this obnoxious girlfriend named Kit McCat who was based on Yoko Ono. So
you didn't talk about that.
No, so basically he created this whole mythology, which I love. And there's this guy who people wanted to work with, but he had this horrifying girlfriend who would try to like make these films and art projects in the middle of stuff, and he would recreate these things, which is really odd.
It's amazing. And he talked about how he had a newsletter, but all the people on his staff secretly hated Jack Talcum.
Oh yeah. It was,
because that's a pretty good twist. They hated their boss.
I think it was Kit McCat's fault. Yeah.
And so then he talked about how he wanted to call himself Joe Diphthong.
Yes, he did.
That was, and then back when you guys started naming yourselves. But he also said that the band's name is not a Toni Morrison reference. It comes from the fact that Milkmen were something fading out when him growing up.
How would he have known they were fading out? He wouldn't have known that look, that's like if we do an
that's what he
now,
said.
That's if we done an interview.
No. He said it's retroactively is what gave Dead Milkmen meaning. Like he's saying he hadn't heard of. He wanted to be like the Dead Boys. Yeah. He hadn't heard the Dead Kennedys. He just thought it was like a kind of a rural thing. Dead Milkmen.
I think it's odd that, first of all, again, it'd been like if 10 years ago I would have said, I'd call myself Rodney Tesla because the Tesla is going to be big, and it didn't exist yet. It makes no sense. I'm saying that he was reading. See, he's an intellectual, and he likes, for some reason, when people think the Milkmen, are dumb or whatever, that amuses him. I mean, like he really it angers me. I'll be like, we have degrees, but no, he that amuses him. So I think there's part of him that would never admit it, but I swear he was reading Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon around that time,
right?
And the lead character is Milkmen Dead.
Right.
What also he's not telling us, I think the Milkmen had come from his family would create. There's a documentary about Stephen Hawking. And his family did the same thing Hawkins' family did. They would create they'd take a board game and they would mutate it into something else. So it would take days to play. And at one point, him and his friend Garth had come up with a game that was like a payola game where you paid to race these songs up and down the charts. And all of Joe's songs were like Joe the Magnificent, Joe the One. And all of Garth's songs were like, I hate Joe, Joe must die. And they would pay and they'd spin this thing. And it was, but it would go on for days. It was like, like Risk, but it was, and that Risk goes on forever.
Yeah.
So they did that, and then Joe had created this history of this band, and the band,
Right.
I think they started off as Sunflower Children of God. They were a hippie band,
Okay.
and then they went through all these mutations, and at one point they were called the Milkmen, and they became a punk band, and they became the Dead Milkmen. And
Right.
That is, I think, and there was a guy in the band called Richard Nixon who played keyboards, and he was called Richard Nixon because he taken a lot of drugs during the 60s. He couldn't remember his name, so he picked up a newspaper and he took the first name. And then Joe created in the mythology, that guy died playing the keyboards. So Joe did this song where there's this long note, like, and that's supposed to be the guy's head on the keyboard.
The swan song.
This is what?
It's swan song.
Yeah, it's like this is when you're living in a steel town and you're young, you have to amuse yourself. The fact
And
that
there's no
actually,
internet.
it became a band makes no sense.
Yeah.
Again, like my wife says, none of this makes any sense.
Like, not only that, became a band that,
Yeah.
but
People pay to see
love
this band
worldwide.
This started as a board game. Really.
one of the things I always, getting into the mythology of the Dead Milkmen and the history, that's super cool. But also learning about the dynamic between you two. He was saying how when he started the band, he wanted you to be the lead singer because he didn't want to be the lead of it, and it was something he reluctantly felt
Extremely shy.
Yeah. And he knew you could handle it, but I don't think people realize, some people, fans, you guys know, but that there are two singers to the Dead Milkmen, and you guys are kind of similar sounding.
I don't think he can actually sing. He can hit notes. I can hit notes now. Like my wife is kind of intrigued by that, where she'll be like, "You realize you hit that note?" And I'll be like, "Yeah." Here's the thing. Also, I'm glad that I have like not much musical ability, because every time I hit a note or I play something right, I'm so happy for it. I know people. No, seriously, I know people that can play every scale, can play by ear, and they don't appreciate it. So I'm super. Yeah, I would say he's the one who can sing. I'm the one who can run around the stage. It's
And the comedy and the parody element, like, has always been something I've loved about the Dead Milkmen. And I remember when I heard "You'll Dance to Anything," that is such a satirical, it's hilarious.
And goth people love it, which I'm glad they do, because
Right.
I everything in that song, I'm good at talking, so it looks like I'm not paying attention, but listening to everything everybody says. It's a skill I developed. It's like it's like being a spy. And so I was out at a club, and literally every line from that song is something somebody said in that club that night. It was a goth club. It was just, I was just, somebody actually said Depeche Mode, and I love Depeche Mode. And the thing is, like, I get these people like, "Man, I'm so glad you stuck it to those goth people." I'm like, I love that music.
Right.
You can't really parody something or an art form unless you have some sort of appreciation for it.
Oh, that's it. Totally. You can't, unless you're fluent in a genre, you can't effectively make fun of it.
John Waters would say that about a lot of things he was making fun of are things he secretly loved.
Yeah.
He loved when the film that's in Odorama. I can't remember the name of it right now, but he said he loved those, Circean films. There's, suburbs with the weird lighting and stuff like that. So yeah, you have to really, part of you have to appreciate something in order to destroy it.
Doing my satirical songs, it's like some of the songs people love a lot are from, knowing about crunk or emo music.
Well, you couldn't do
hipster
something
culture
like This Gigantic Robot Kills without understanding ska.
without loving ska.
Yeah,
That's a better example.
Yeah, that's a great example of a ska, of like appreciation of ska.
Yeah.
They should hope they show that or teach it in ska school. I hope there's a ska school somewhere. Like all these guys named Neville and hats. Yeah.
We'll get Adam Gorin to co-teach at the Ska Academy.
School. Ska Academy. That's what it should be called. Because it would have to be in
Ska
Coventry.
Academy.
Yeah, it would have to be in Coventry in the UK.
Okay, so where ska is big still.
Yeah, well, that's where Jerry Dammers, who started the two-tone movement, that's where he lived.
Interesting.
Yeah, he had no teeth, and he had this incredible education, and he managed to fund the first. This is a true story. He managed to fund the first Specials album by telling his landlord he owed his landlord back rent, and the landlord couldn't get rid of him. So Jerry Dammers said, "If you give me money to make this album, I'll go away." And the guy did it. The guy, in order to get rid of Jerry Dammers, gave him the money to make the first Specials album just to get him out of his life. Yeah.
And So he was from Coventry, which was bombed.
It was bombed. Yeah, it was.
And there's that famous church that's like left bombed out. It's a museum.
And
there.
before that, even it had a bad history. I think it was being termed like being sent to Coventry. In other words, you were shipped off to this.
Send thee
town.
to a Coventry. Hey,
what an unlucky town. This might be worse than where I grew up.
Well, so wait, Specials. This town is like a ghost town.
Yeah.
So is that's about bombed out Coventry?
No,
movie?
it's about actually it's about around the time Thatcher got in. You were having the riots in the UK. There had been bands playing everywhere.
Right.
And the band stopped playing because there was rioting, there was fighting, and they were basically saying there's nothing to do. We had stuff to do. We had this really exciting scene. So yeah, there are two songs that really sum up what life was like during that summer under Thatcher. There's Ghost Town. There's also a song called Red Mecca by Cabaret Voltaire that hits the same sort of note. Yeah.
You are very fluent with your musical history.
I have to be because it comes up. It comes up on the road because you're telling stories, or you meet somebody that's a fan of somebody. Yeah. You say, well, I tell you right now. I was talking about Rockwell the other day at work. The guy did Somebody's Watching Me.
Yeah.
I was like, I think he's Barry Gordy's son. Somebody looked it up. I'm like, you're right.
And that's how he got Michael Jackson on the chorus.
Is that Michael Jackson on the chorus?
Yeah, that's Michael Jackson.
I should have known that. He's like the most obvious thing I don't know.
He's just telling the story on the verses. It's like a Joe Rodney collaboration.
Yeah, there you go. He sounds so much like Michael Jackson. I never put that together.
So speaking of You'll Dance to Anything, Bucky Fellini, where does the title of the album come from?
The idea is I like Fellini films. I grew up more versed in film than anything else. And when you were young, that was rebellion. Pre-punk, rebellion was weird films. So we would go all the way out to the Tower Theater, and they would show these weird films like, they have like Pink Flamingos on a bill with Easy Rider, or they just, it was the weirdest stuff. Sometimes they'd show 24 hours of bad films. I loved that. So I liked Fellini, and I liked the idea of, and I didn't find out till later on, there's an old Catskills Jewish saying of Mendel Picasso, which is a low rent Picasso. In other words, like he'd be like Picasso's third cousin, and it was like this in joke amongst Jewish people in the Catskills.
Where does Mendel just being a generic name?
Mendel's like some sort of, they took it, I guess it was some sort of like Jewish nickname at the time. There's a version of Lydia the Tattooed Lady where Groucho Marx refers to Mendel Picasso. And so we looked that up and we found out he was thinking the same thing. To us, Bucky Fellini was this sort of low rent Fellini. It was like a Western Fellini. And I don't know, it was like one of those things we're sitting around and I don't know if whoever said it, and we just laughed for like it just seemed funny at the time.
Bucky, right? Yeah. Okay, that's good. Let's go through the album titles. Big Lizard in My Backyard. There's a story there.
Well, we had a roommate who had a big lizard. Joe and I did. He had an iguana, and he wasn't good at putting the iguana in its cage, which I'm totally for. I had a turtle that was a free range turtle, and so the iguana would just roll all over the house. So then, like one night we're in the living room, and we had like guests, and he comes in, he just reaches up on the wall, and he takes the iguana, and somebody thought it was like a fake rubber iguana we had stuck to the wall. Like, no, that's real. And so that was the inspiration for Big Lizard.
Okay, eat your paisley.
Parsley sounds better.
Eat your paisley.
Okay, at that time there was a lot of paisley rock, which isn't bad, but paislly rock was like this like jangly type of like rock that was Let's Active was a, and I love Let's Active, but we just thought it was just funny to say eat your paisley. Also, I think I had a party at one point around that time, and I had like a paisley jacket, and somebody was really offended by it. This guy was like, oh, he was like yelling at me. And I think that was the guy who inspired the title.
He was yelling about your
Yeah, he was like yelling about the paisley. It really the paisley jacket upset him so much. And I was like, okay. And it was just like, he wasn't even, I didn't know him. He's like one of those people, when you have a party, there are people who show up and they're never with anybody. In other words, like, right. Who let that guy in? Like, I don't know him. Yeah.
But he sure hates paisley.
Yeah. My friend Rocco once tricked me when I was young into going to like a serious adult party. But that's a whole nother story.
Okay, so Beelzebubba, Beelzebubba is self-explanatory, but how do you...
No, not really, because
tell us.
Well, it's Brian Beatty came up with it. He's really good at coming up with band names. He came up with Joan of Arkansas, which is a great band name.
That's great.
Yeah, and I don't know if he came up with Bad Mother Goose or not, but he's really good. So he said, we were sitting around, we were trying to come up with like funny devil names. That was around the time of this old Satanic Panic.
Right,
and he said Beelzebubba. And it's weird because like I think of like Bubba Hotep years later.
Right,
so
right,
the idea of the Bubba is, but the Yeah, he came up with that. I had to actually Satanic Panic and all that stuff. I did a podcast where I was playing Dungeons and Dragons with a kid, and I had to explain to him how at one point people were convinced that Dungeons and Dragons was going to make their kids grow horns and leap in front of.
And Harry Potter.
Yeah, Harry Potter. Well, that was Harry Potter. I always had something to blame. Yeah.
Beelzebub, MC Kristen, our roommate from hell, has that reference, right? He said, "How many Milkmen albums are there named after you?" That's his diss to me.
That always cracks me up.
That's a good shout out. Metaphysical Graffiti.
Wait, we also forgot to mention that MC Chris accidentally punched me in the genitals when we were on stage with him that time. We were on stage with Chris, and we were talking to him, and he went to do a fake grab at my stuff, leaned forward a little too much.
He punched you in the genitals.
Not purposely, but he accidentally popped me one. Because I sang soprano on the next two songs.
Wait.
We were doing.
You're doing Mr. Raven.
You were on the tour with him,
right?
And then and he would do that hilarious thing about you guys with the sock. It kept getting grosser and grosser. We were talking about hanging a sock on the door, but he would defecate into the sock and make lava planet. And it's just like, and you're sitting there like turning absolutely bright red because it is a really weird thing he's doing. And then I came up on stage to do something with you guys, and he leaned over. I said so, and he leaned over to do like a fake grab at my stuff and lost his balance.
When we were doing the roommate from hell, he'd go into this gross bit about me being his roommate.
Yeah, but he said he would amp it up each time.
Yeah, and that was the last show of the tour, so it was just graphic.
It was wonderfully gross. It was, and then it was. I think it was that was near Halloween. I think there was a costume party that night.
Yeah,
or Comic-Con was in town.
He would do a costume.
Oh, that's right. He would do a costume,
right.
But I think he happened to luck out that he was in night Comic-Con was in town, so he did the costume party. There were a lot of people in town for Comic-Con.
Yeah,
come over to that one.
Yeah, he's done a lot for the nerdcore movement and Chris, he's a good guy and he's toured a lot.
Very funny, yeah.
Toured a lot with us, and I'm thankful to have worked with him a lot. Okay, keeping it moving. Let's talk about so Metaphysical Graffiti.
This is good for me because I don't really follow the band. I'm not joking. People will ask me questions about the band. I'm like, I don't know.
About your band?
I know stuff about every other band in the world. I know next to nothing about my own band. I don't even have some people keep memorabilia. I don't have anything.
Right.
I keep stuff from other bands. I have all these. If you see my office, I have my friend Rick's colonoscopy from Rick from Mindless Faith. I did a tour with Mindless Faith, Ego Likeness. I played keyboards in Caustic, and I'm trying to remember Stoneburner is also part of it. And I'm going to go out and sing a song called "The Fluffer" with Mindless Faith. But before I go out on stage, wherever, Rick goes, "Hey, listen, this is really important. And I want you to have this." And it was this colonoscopy.
Like a photo?
Yeah, like the big, like.
And you have it framed now?
Well, I have it framed now upstairs, yeah. But the thing is, I took it out and we were playing in DC and they were opening for us. And I showed the audience, I think I don't know if it was them or Ego was opening for us. And I said, and it wound up like in the DC paper, a big thing of his colonoscopy.
You holding up was in the DC
to me,
paper?
that yes. I don't have any Deb Milkman stuff whatsoever, but I got Rick's colonoscopy.
Well, I hope the proofreader checked for semicolons. Hey! Okay, so Metaphysical Graffiti. Isn't there a Zeppelin album called Physical Graffiti?
There is a Zeppelin album called Physical Graffiti. There is the cover of that is supposed to parody the cover of it. And the great thing about it was we got to make models. So we made the models. My friend George actually has the models. I think he might have given one back to Dean, but so I like it. Anything I can make models for, I'm really happy. So I'm like, ooh. So we made models for that. Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's talking, yeah. And that's, I think, when you're kind of getting, that's kind of like lazy though, when you're sort of parodying other, titles. So I think.
Well, I've been
clever
guilty
at
of
the
that.
time.
I've been guilty of.
You got to call it something. Well, yeah, but you pull it off better than we do. I don't know.
And that has Smoking Banana Peels on it,
that
right?
That did have Smoking Banana Peels.
And that and Punk Rock Girl were the two videos on Beavis and Butthead. Am I right?
I think Beavis and Butthead showed every video we ever did because I would hear about it. Like people go like, oh, because around that time I was actually just living as a musician, and people, like my neighbor down the hall would go, hey, you're on Beavis and Butthead again. So I think they showed every video that we would ever put out. I think when they came back, they even got one of the newer ones and showed it.
And Joe and Beavis said Joe was the one guy whose video
he could beat up. Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Which is great. I think rock and roll should be full of people that can easily be beat up. Most people can beat me up.
I agree.
Rock and roll, like people in rock and roll should either look like the guy that works in the cubicle next to you, or they shouldn't. They should go the other extreme. Like I always like it when I go to see a band and they're very extreme looking, but they keep that look off stage. I think is awesome. If I'd have been in Kiss, I would have had that makeup tattooed on me. I always thought when Gene Simmons, when I was a kid, I thought, oh, when Gene Simmons goes home, the wife has like, the big devil things, and the dog looks like that. The kids all have
that's what's so special about
ICP
is that they don't break character. Even doing interviews, they wear the makeup.
I think, what was the band? Oh God! Why am I blanking? Very satanic band. I can't remember the name. Not Guar. No. But they never broke character. The one guy lived the satanic lifestyle for years. They were the band that try to remember. The liner notes were like, "This little libertine enjoys." We have to read them in that voice. And so my friend Dave Brookman and I were sitting around reading them one time, going like, "This little libertine went to market." This little libertine. God, why am I blanking on it? Oh, Cradle of Filth.
Oh
Cradle of
yeah.
Filth. Or the Israeli version, Dreidel of Filth. Thank you. I'll be here all week.
I played a show in Melbourne, a club show, and the Cradle of Filth guys just were at the club.
Oh my God, I would have so many questions. I knew somebody who I think was married to one of them or dated one of them.
I gave them a shout out from my stage, and they liked it. God. They liked it. That was cool.
I bet they're super cool. I mean, I know people have known them and said they're super nice. But one guy actually, he lived that life. Like if you went over to his house, all the I can't remember if Jen from the Genitortures was married to him or dated him, or I don't know. I have my memory's getting foggy about old age.
So Soul Rotation, your first record on Hollywood Records.
Yeah, the first one we had money for.
How big was your budget for that
album? I don't know because I'm never interested in that. But that was the first one where I had my sampler. I still have that weighs about 1,000 pounds that you put floppy disks. No, they're A discs. They're not the old giant B discs.
Yeah.
But we had that and we lied to the record company a lot. So we would say that we hired, like it'd be a flute sound, but the record companies at that time didn't understand sampling. If they heard a flute, they just thought it was a flute.
So you'd say
we hired a flautist. Yeah, we have some more money because this guy, he's not going to touch that flute unless we give him $100. Yeah, so,
that's good.
And then you would just we'd spend that money. So that generally worked. Yeah, that was the and it was weird because they were super disappointed with it, but we were super happy. I was fairly looking back on that record it's okay, but I remember being really happy with it at the time.
Yeah. What was the title about though?
Soul Rotation. Oh yeah. Okay. Around this time I had begun, there's a book called High Weirdness by Mail, pre-internet. You had to entertain yourself through the mail. And this book was written by a guy from Church of Subgenius, Reverend Stang.
Oh yeah.
And it was just a list of weird people you could write to. So I wrote to all of them. And subsequently went through several girlfriends because no woman wants to live with a guy who's getting crazy mail. And one guy actually cursed me through the mail, and he sent this weird curse. And my friend Matt Dubin was standing next to me, and we both had like so many months of bad luck. We actually had to find somebody to take the curse off.
Is that true?
Yeah, it was a waitress that actually took the curse off of us in a bar in Milwaukee. She waved around her hands. We were telling her the story. Again, it goes back to Milwaukee. We had this string of bad luck, and we left to go on this like mini tour of the Midwest, and just crap kept happening. Yeah. And I'm a huge Yankees fan, and I had my Yankees. I had like a Yankees shirt on. I'm in Milwaukee, Yankees jersey. I had a Yankees cap, and it's the Yankees. And this is like back in the like late '80s, early '90s. So it's like the Wade Boggs Yankees. It's the Yankees, and I'm like, holy shit, the Yankees are here. But the Yankees didn't really want to talk to me or deal with me. So I learned a trick in Hawaii, which is if you have a jukebox and Meatloaf's Paradise by the Dashboard Light is on that jukebox, put as much money as you can into that jukebox and hit that song over and over. It'll empty out a bar quicker than if you shout fire. So we went outside and we were drinking, and then we told the waitress the story. The waitress said, okay, well, she goes like, I removed the curse from both of you. And of course we tipped generously. And if things, did get better because psychologically we thought. But so getting back to this, I'm getting all this weird mail. I get mail from guys who would always predict the end of the world, get it wrong, and then have to send out an email, or not email, send out a newsletter showing their math. How was wrong. But I'm pretty sure it's going to end on, if you're wrong. And that was great. So one of these things had a crazy mail that I got. There's also people that thought Jimmy Carter was a robot and that he squeaked when he walked, and that just insane stuff.
Right.
And if I ever meet Jimmy Carter, I want to ask him about that. But the one of the things was a thing that said beyond reincarnation, soul rotation. The idea that souls would leap from body to body, and we again were sitting around just trying to come up with a title, and I had all this crazy mail that I got, and we thought the title has to be somewhere in the crazy mail. I think it was Dean was laughing at that. He's just like, who worded this? Who wrote this headline?
Soul rotation.
Soul
Wow.
rotation.
So there you go.
Well, people would say, is your song in heavy rotation? We go, no, it's in soul rotation. Plus the whole Philadelphia soul thing, gambling up, and we like that. So.
Well, and now there's the Soul Cycle, which is which is like exercise biking with music. Soul Cycle is like a.
I could do that if it's like 60s soul music. Yeah, that's why is there no? That's the perfect music for exercise. Good Lord.
Okay, so not Richard, but Dick. And let me ask you:
right,
is it because Richard Nixon was one of the original members of the band?
No, it's because there's a guy. I forget his last name right now, but our friend Sully knew him, and he would actually his name was Richard, but he didn't like to be called that. So when you met him, he would say, "Not Richard, Dick." He would actually say that, like not ironically. He would actually say that, and he was his term for people who were weird was that person's an agent. That guy's an agent. Oh yeah, he's like secret government agent or FBI agent. Like I'm pretty sure that guy's an agent. So we were like, wow, we need to honor this man with an album. So yeah, that's it was an EP. It's not quite an album. I wanted it to be an album. There was so much stuff laying around for that. It was really good.
What about Stoney's Extra Stout, parentheses, pig?
Oh, terrible idea. There was a long story. There's a guy named Richard Stoney Smith buried in Highgate. I love Highgate in London. And Stoney's grave is shaped like a rock. And he is the guy who invented the process that made Hovis bread possible. Richard?
What's Hovis bread?
Hovis bread is some big bread in England. I've actually heard like bands talk about Hovis bread. But I almost got run over by a Hovis truck one day in England, in Eton. And so we just put it together and we said, Stoney's Extra Stout Pig. Yeah, okay. And I think somebody was yelling pig for some reason. Not at the police, just shouting pig into the air.
Wait, how does it relate to the bread?
I don't know. Well, he's the Stoney Smith is the guy
I see.
He invented the cracked wheat process that made Hovis. How would our lives be different without Richard Stoney Smith? I don't even want to think about it.
So Stoney's Extra Stout is like a beer.
It's a beer made by, and I don't know where the pig comes from. I believe there was a guy just wandering the streets, pig.
So Rodney, your album titles become increasingly obscure and weird. Big Lizard in My Backyard. Okay, I can imagine that. Eat Your Paisley. That's funny.
Yeah, starting to get weird. Yeah.
Bucky Fellini, you needed to explain that.
Yeah, once you need to explain a joke, it's less funny. Yeah.
Soul rotation, not Richard but Dick.
This is what happens when you get a band and you're
it's just so weird.
But you're sequestered together. So the band jokes. You know what I mean? It's like I have friends who are very intelligent, who have degrees, but they're in bands, and they're in the van for 2 minutes, and they're laughing at exit number 2, like number 2, or like exit 69. And it immediately makes you a child. And here's the thing: after a while, like all your jokes are just in common with these people.
Right.
It was tough for me when the band was disbanded because like I had all this history,
right?
And nowhere. Once we got back together, it was like we could all immediately understand each other.
Yeah.
But it's a weird thing. So naturally, I think as bands go on, Frank Zappa had that whole thing.
Yeah,
where everything was like basically based on an in joke from the band.
Right, and the in jokes that the oral culture and the storytelling it reinforces that.
Yeah, it does. It's and again, you're isolated. Probably better for bands now because they're maybe less isolated. They have social media. They can film themselves in the van.
Yeah.
But for us, we were completely sequestered, and you were in the studio forever.
Yeah.
So
when you came back in 2008 and you did The King in Yellow, that's a specific literary reference.
That is a literary reference. My wife had, it's a book I recommended to young people for years. My wife had seen a thing called Cigarette Burns on Masters of Horror. And this is when we just got back there and we were working on the album. And my wife had said, was blown away by it. And I said, well, it's like The King in Yellow. It's the idea of, I was explaining to her about the book that you would read that would make you crazy. And she sent away for a very exact replica of the first pressing of it. So it had all the weird spelling things and all. So that's what she had and read it from. And The King of Yellow is absolutely horrifying. I mean, it's written in the late 1800s. It takes place in New York City in the 1930s. And, Jewish people have been exiled from the city. It's just really creepy. It's like they see Nazism coming, and it's horrifying, the psychological horror that they understand that these people there's one story. It's told from the perspective, two different perspectives. One of the person looking at the crazy person, and the other one's from the crazy person. So the crazy person really believes that the King in Yellow is real, and that this crown that he has, which is cardboard, is a real crown. And this other guy is just trying to figure out why his cousin's acting the way. But the idea is sometimes the King in Yellow is a play, sometimes it's a book. So I explained that to my wife, and she really got into it. And then I said, we should call the album The King in Yellow. And unfortunately for us, about the time it was released was the time the first season of True Detective hit. And apparently The King in Yellow was a big thing in that. So,
So people were thinking maybe...
maybe we knew something.
Yeah.
I was like, no, we don't know a damn thing. No.
That's interesting.
It's like people that somebody wrote a song about Chekhov, the poet, the playwright, and somebody thought they were talking about Star Trek. It's the same,
Right.
Yeah. But I would recommend that book. Young people would get really weirded out. I would say, people in their teens would tell me, you have anything you recommend for me to read? I would say, yeah, you should read The King in Yellow. I've recommended it for years. But I'm like, you won't believe how weird this book is.
Yeah.
And they would next time you see them, they were changed and not for the better. They looked like they were in their 40s.
What about Pretty Music for Pretty People?
Album I'm the most proud of. This is, again, the thing of my gift for speaking to people when I'm hanging out and talking a lot, but actually listening to what they say. So I was at a club one night here in Philly. It's not really here anymore. And it was like nobody ever went to it, which is why I went to it. Vienna wasn't there that night. There were some people I know, and one guy just went on a rant because he was, we were listening to this really dark music, and he was not happy with the state of, again, like the happy music that was being sold. Like, everybody consume and have fun.
Yeah.
And he was, and he said, I call that, because I don't think we still had a thesis I like to have a thesis for the album.
Yeah.
And I don't think we had that yet. And he said, I call that pretty music for pretty people. And light bulb went off. So I immediately, bang, whole song in my head. Yeah. And I'm like, I got to go home now, write something. So I went home and just came up with that keyboard part, that weird. I knew right there it should be like a circus, and so then once you had the theme, everything else could begin to fit in. So I had songs laying around for it, but that was like nothing gelled it until got to that point, and then that was like that song just one mean screed about how awful the music industry is.
You are a very honest writer.
You have to be,
unfiltered, and
because I'm not writing for myself. I'm writing for people who need that music. There's lots of people who are out there writing about, isn't it great? I've got this, I've got a Tesla, and I've got all this money in the bank, and I can't relate to that. Somebody needs to go out and write for. I wish I could relate to it. Somebody needs to go out and just write for the songs I liked when I was growing up. Was the songs written for the perspective of people who were broke. The underdogs. So that's
well, that stuff is. It's lauded because it's aspirational. And I think that's a lot of the hip hop is like this middle class, like sinkhole of like, what's going to make you happy and like all the accoutrement.
Which is weird because the original hip hop wasn't, Schoolie D. And I just saw Schoolie I think like a month or so back. I actually ran into him twice. And Schoolie D's daughter, by the way, very talented.
He was at our show with the Nerdcore guys at last year.
Really? Oh my god!
Because he knows Schaefer.
Oh man, he is. Absolutely,
I mean, he knows Mega Ran. Sorry,
he's a super genius. I mean, he's just. I didn't even know Mega Ran. We brought that up myself. We were
PSK.
Talking,
what's it stand for?
PSK.
Right?
What does it mean? Yeah. Just. I was super into him growing up, and or in my young days, and his wife. The way my wife doesn't believe stories about him. There's a story. Him and I had been thrown out of a studio once for being silly, and his wife was like,
you and Schoolie D?
Yeah. There was a studio we were in. Somebody made the mistake of having Schoolie D. I went there because they were doing a remix of I can't remember what song it was now, but and what happened was they the Was Brothers had worked on it, and we were doing this extended mix, and Joe Butcher was doing it, and Schoolie D was in the same studio. And he was sitting there waiting for someone. We started talking because I had like drum machines and we were talking about actually working together, which didn't happen, but would have been great.
Yeah.
We had an idea, but somebody came in and said, "Oh, these guys have to sit here for a while. Let's give them a case of beer." So they set down this case of beer. And Schoolie and I started putting them down. We're talking. We had an idea because at that time rap was just starting to get big. Uh-huh. And so we had this idea and they were homogenizing rap. So this guy from the suburbs with his kid comes into town and he's like, excuse me, houseboy? And the Schoolie go, you mean Homeboy? And he's like, yeah. My kids, they really love the rap. They love the, and Schoolie would give them directions to like the worst part of North Philly. And that was the idea. And we're laughing, having a good time. And because we're having fun, we're putting down beers.
This is like a skit you were conceptualizing.
Yeah. It was like, it was like this whole thing, so I wanted to play like nerdy white guy, and I thought it was great. And so a role I was born to play. And so we had, and we're putting down the beers, and there's I think like a Hooters gold record on the wall. And
what, like a compilation Hooters had put out?
Yeah, not like a compilation. Like Hooters made a record at that studio, and it was certified gold.
The restaurant?
No, not the restaurant Hooters. It was a band called the Hooters.
Oh, okay, I didn't.
That would have been great.
I was like, this story is so
like girls in there. I forgot there was a restaurant called Hooters. Oh, I think
forgotten.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. No, that would have been weird. That's odd. And think about the band, the Hooters, and the restaurant, the Hooters. That's a weird. But they there was a band called the Hooters, and they used to they called that because the guy would play a melodic. They actually played Live Aid, but I think
wow.
Well, they played Live Aid, but the guy running Live Aid was like, "Who the fuck are the Hooters?" But they, so the Hooters play this. They had this gold record up on the wall.
Okay,
not the restaurant, the band, and Schoolie goes, "We should sign that." I'm like, "What?" Yeah, we should sign that because it'll be up there for 100 years.
People will think it's
nobody ever notice it. Nobody, and you and I don't know it's up there. And I'm like, that's not a bad idea. We take it down. We write obscene, just the worst stuff in there, and we sign it.
Like you're in the band,
like we're in the Hooters. Like I think we even like knew some of the guys' names or whatever. So, but I mean, also I have childlike writing, and I've been drinking. So I mean, it looked like hieroglyphics. And Schoolie writes something, so put it back on the wall. And we're sitting there having a couple, and we forgot about it like 5 minutes later. And the secretary walks in, and for some reason, her eyes immediately went up to that. She goes, "That is not cool." And she runs out. She gets like 80 people all lined up to come in and tell us, "That is not cool." They make us clean it off. And of course, like, this is a weird thing when like you're there with Schoolie D, who invented gangster rap, but you're the one who looks guilty. Like there's no way they were going to go look at Schoolie and go, "You did this," because I look super guilty. Yeah. So I was like, "Yeah, I did it. I'm really sorry. I did." So then Schoolie's, I think his wife he told her the story and she never believed it. So she was like, "Wow, you actually, that is true. That's kind of odd." I'm like, "Yeah." So I met his daughter. I'm like, "Yeah, your dad and I were thrown out of the studio. Ask him about it."
So we're talking about how hip hop though has this theme of being aspirational and
yeah, they cleaned it up. They do that with everything. They did that with soul music at one point, and like the soul music, the original soul music stuff was it's stuff like Freddie's Dead. It was about being poor, it was about drugs, it was about, and then they cleaned it up, and you could kind of hear a wingtip shoe tapping in the background. You kind of hear the guy from thing. They did that with they did it with hip hop. I mean, the largest selling hip hop album of all time, oddly enough, is Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. So they it's the idea of commodifying your dissent. They did it with punk rock. Punk, you have you wind up with like Blink 182. You wind up with Green Day. You wind up with sort of aspirational punk because somebody always goes in and cleans the music up.
But do you like Green Day? Don't you think they have some great songs?
I don't really know much about them. I'm sure they're super nice people. We played a show one time and they were the opening band. Think about that. If you see, you're going to wind up being super rich because if you open for us, you're good. You're fine. You're wonderful things will happen to you. I don't really know a whole heck of a lot about their music. I'm sure maybe I've heard like one or two songs. It sounds fine to me. I wish them a lot of luck. I'm sure they're fantastic people, but I'm saying that there's a point where stuff begins to sort of get commodified, and
Well, for something to cross over, it needs to have an accessibility, right? Or something. And the best art is the stuff that has that hook, but also retains that quirkiness. And I mean, it's interesting though, because your band has had huge commercial success. But you never had to sell out and compromise.
Well, also it had huge commercial success with the song "I Wasn't On," which is one of my favorite things. I occupy the weirdest position in rock and roll, in that I'm a member of a one-hit wonder band, but I wasn't on the hit, which is so awesome. Makes me so happy.
You didn't play anything on that hit?
No, I wasn't even there.
But you're in the video.
No, reluctantly. I think I got fired from the video. I started wandering around that was filmed at the Eastern State.
Yeah.
And I got lost and started wandering around inside. Well, I was wandering around inside, then I got lost.
Yeah.
And like the odds of this are 1,000,000 to 1, but I finally found a door that led back to where everything was. Uh-huh. And of course, like I opened that door and I walked right in the middle of a shoot. They're filming. I'm like, I'm good. I'm going home now.
Yeah, Joe was talking about how it was weird because you were the lead singer, and then this song that he was on was the one that was the hit.
Yeah, and then the record company wanted me gone. I don't know if he talked about that.
No, he didn't talk about that.
Oh, yeah, they always want the angry guy gone. I think I only hung on because I think I had Stewart, which was like a hit amongst angry people because they were oh, this is these are the crazy old racist guys in my neighborhood, and it's taking a shot at them, which is fun. Always take a shot, never punch down, always punch up, and it's fun to make songs that make fun of racists because racists aren't good at humor. You know what I mean? They're not. It's not a weapon that they have in their arsenal. Racists have terrible jokes that people just go, "What? No."
Punching up meaning people who are occupying like higher places.
Yeah, higher places are people. Yeah, just awful people. When you punch up
the hegemony, trying to puncture the hegemony.
You want to punch at the patriarchy. You want to punch it.
Right.
So, so there would be things like they would be invited to play on like a show, and they kind of forget to bring me along. So I'd be like back in the hotel, like, oh, where do I go? Well, you don't really do anything. Because
they only
song.
wanted that one song.
Yeah, but that's I think the idea was that I would just go away, but I didn't. So I think our manager would have been super happy if I had just gone away.
Wow, that's weird. That's so weird.
Well, I don't think it's that weird. He actually wanted to. I think he told Joe at one point if Joe just hung in the band, he would help Joe's career. So Joe didn't tell you any of this stuff.
Well, Joe talked about how you're very creative and great songwriter, and how you've kept everyone together. And
That's nice. Now I'm bad mouthing him.
No, but
not bad mouthing Joe.
No. Joe was saying that, but like. To be fair, he didn't want to go into detail about all this on record. He talked about the touring and like what it was like having him be the voice of, and having like how it was awkward when you go to a venue and there's a picture of him on the poster or something like that, but how it was like the band, everyone really worked together and was really necessary, but it was weird.
I think it's like the Damned, Captain Sensible. Why I relate to the Damned. Captain Sensible had a big hit with Happy Talk. And people would go see the Damned expecting to hear Happy Talk, and they would get these guys up on stage spitting and the same thing. And I give Joe lots of credit because Joe's a brilliant songwriter, a great musician, much better than I am. I give him many props, but I think the idea was, record company is like, oh, this guy's got a kind of happy hit, and this other guy is up on stage dropping the F word every 2 minutes. Which, if you ran a record company, which would you rather have? I know, if I got kids that got to go to college, that's where I'm going.
But it must have been awkward, and it must have been like
it was pretty bad. But for me, everything is awkward. So, I can't say. I think stuff like that just fuels my fire more. I think it made me want to write more, like less commercial stuff. I actually wrote on the last album, there's that song, The Sun Turns Our Patio into a Lifeless Hell. And that's because somebody said at one point, you should write more commercial stuff. I saw the Sundowner awning ad, and I'm like, yeah, I'll write a theme for that. I'll write an actual commercial.
That is the brave thing to like persist on your own terms in the face of something.
Well, there's nothing else I could have done.
I
can't. I didn't. I didn't want to depart or anything, and it was still kind of fun at that point. Yeah, and it still gave me a platform to get out there and talk about the stuff that I like to talk about. And people in the audience that couldn't sing, they needed a hero too. Not everybody can sing and play guitar and be talented like Joe.
Right.
Some people, not everybody can be nice like Joe. Somebody has to be evil and dark like me.
You two are yin and yang.
It is. If you watch the stage, it's great because the people on Joe's side of the stage, they'll help you move. You know what I mean? If you call them, I'm moving. Can you help me? And they'll say, yeah. The people on my side of the stage will help you move a body. You know what I mean? Like, take it out by the airport and dump it out there. Nobody ever looks.
That's good. That's good.
That's the way I divide. It is literally the light and dark when you want. Yeah.
Can we talk about Dave?
Yeah, sure. Of course we can, because I love talking about Dave.
Yeah.
People think that they're always like, they broach that as if they're like, can we talk about that time a landmine blew your head off? And I'm like, no, Dave was super funny. Yeah. And it's something people don't get outside the band. Yeah. This is going to sound horrible, but it is true. One of the funniest events I ever went to was Dave's funeral, and Dave would have loved that. Because Dave was a funny guy, did a lot of funny stuff, and we were laughing all the way at the stuff he did through the funeral, which sounds awful, but it is, how I'm sure he would have liked to have been celebrated.
Joe talked about his prank calls.
My God, yeah. Yeah, I would go on a date, and I would come back at like 3 or 4 in the morning to the Milkman house, and Dave Love would be up at night, like on the phone, crank calling people. Because, this is back before they could easily trace people.
Right.
And they were elaborate. Like they were just, I don't even know if they could be classified. They were more like performance art than crank calls, because there would be these, large things where he would call and he would say like, I'd be coming down through the basement, and Dave would be like, hey, Rodney, listen, can you ask this guy if his refrigerator's running? And then see, like you're a little kid. I'd be like, okay, is your refrigerator running? You better catch it, and then hang up. Then Dave would call them back and pretend to be the guy's father. And then
pretend to be furious.
Yeah, he'd be like, excuse me, did you just get a crank call? Well, first the guy on the other end always pick up like, listen, and he go, I'm sorry, I'm the father. I just caught my son doing that. Right. He gave me another number before. And the guy would be like, and then Dave would go into like basically how he was going to punish his son. And it'd be a draconian thing. And then the guy would try to talk him out of it. He'd be like, let me tell you right now, buddy, I've got a phone book rolled up and I am ready to teach him a lesson. And like, it would be, the worst was we would get people who would come to the house trying to like sell us things, or we would get like, or religious people trying to like sell us their religion. And like religious people, Dave would just get like a copy of Catcher in the Rye and try to convince them that he ate a lunch every day that was going to send him to heaven. And they just wanted to get out of the house. There was an insurance guy one time that Dave told that he might have to pay a little bit more for insurance because he had a hobby of skydiving. And the guy goes, well, yeah, that you're going to have to pay a little bit more. And remember, this guy knocked on the door selling insurance. Yeah. And Dave's like, well, you have to understand, every time I jump out of a plane, I use a smaller and smaller parachute. Soon I will need no parachute at all. But the greatest Dave Blood thing ever. This is my favorite.
Yeah.
We were walking through the University of Georgia one time. We were going to do a radio show. And we're coming back. And Dave sees a line. And if Dave saw a line, he would get in the line. So we get in this line, and we wound up being part of the University of Georgia Freshman Orientation Program. They take us into, yes, it's worse than you can imagine. They take us into this big, like, auditorium. And they're like, okay, everybody, first you have to fill out these forms. Otherwise, we won't have the sketches. And Dave is like pounding us like, I want sketches. And so everybody's looking at him, right? They're like, this is not good. This man clearly has a problem. So at one point, there's a guy sitting next to him. And he puts his hand on the guy's knee and goes, I can tell you're not like the others. Like, just like speaking these weird alien voices. So,
wait, sketches of what?
They would come out and do these comedy sketches. But they gave us form. Now, Dave asked this guy, Dave goes, say, like to say, he saw this film called Iceman. He was obsessed with this guy would say the name Peter, like, Peter. So he goes, my name is Peter. What's yours? So the guy tells him his name and whatever. So Dave can see this guy's name on this form. You had to fill this thing out. It was like a questionnaire. They give you a lot of freshman orientation. They want to kind of weed out people who might have some psychological difficulties.
Oh, okay.
So it's like, you would check the box for, do I think the people on the news are making up the news? So Dave is checking everything, and I'm watching him do it, right? And he's checking everything that is completely insane.
Right.
But he's leaving the name off, right? So then they say, okay, now everybody pass the forms to the right. So remember, this guy's sitting to Dave's left. His form has to go to Dave. Dave takes his form
and puts the guy's name.
Takes the guy's name and puts it on the form that he has, and then pockets the guy's form. So I imagine this poor guy got like a visit. He would just do stuff like that because he, when he was a student and poor, he would have to amuse himself. So he would amuse himself by taking like ketchup packets and watching the trolley run the movie. I learned a lot about amusing myself from Dave. Yeah. So it's impossible to talk about him without cracking up. And again, on top of that, he was very, very smart. He had a degree in Eastern European economics, which is, he actually read The Economist, which to me is amazing. I majored in poli-sci. I don't think I had a subscription to The Economist until I was well into my like late 30s. So.
Yeah. Wow. So he's a brilliant guy and a very fun guy to tour with.
Yeah.
And when did you see any signs that maybe he was suffering or?
Oh, I hadn't seen him in a long time.
Yeah.
And this is why your song 23 I always really liked. It's because you don't really see it. And he his mother had passed away. He was close to her, and I didn't know what to say. I think I called and said if you want to talk, but I'm not good in any of those situations. But you can't blame yourself. You don't know. And I didn't see it. Nobody saw it. If anybody saw it, we would have done something. But we knew he wasn't happy that he really couldn't play bass anymore. He had tendonitis. I told him at one point, I was like, look, I'll rig something up. some sort of keyboard or something, you can trigger it. But he didn't want to do that. This is we actually had not seen each other for a while, but we saw they took a bunch of horrible Milkmen videos, just awful crap. They made a thing called Philadelphia in Love. Don't buy it. Don't pay for it. And we did the commentary track for it. The commentary track for it is hilarious. Might be worth it for that. Where we're like, why did we do this? Why did we make this? This is embarrassing. Please stop. But so it was really, really good to hang around. And I thought we might be playing back together after that, but we weren't. But it wasn't too long after we did that. But he liked playing bass, but he had to go from having this sort of secure life to and it's a tough transition to working like a day job. And you don't have a lot of, you have skills, but you don't have a lot of readily transferable skills. You've been riding around for a decade in a van playing shows, and that's your living. You make your rent, you do that.
Right.
And I think he went showed up at like a chicken place to work. And he had asthma, he had a lot of physical problems too. So he, again, we didn't see it coming, but maybe in retrospect, we should have paid more attention. But it's always easy to say, I should have done this or should have done that.
You taking a break, right?
Because it wasn't. The idea was if you don't have the people in the band, then it's why do it? And Dean wanted to have kids and lead like a normal life, which I understand. I think I went to the same meeting. I was getting ready to quit too, but it wasn't fun.
Yeah.
If it's not fun, just stop. That was Johnny Rotten's great line about Kurt Cobain. If it's not fun, stop. And so I think I was going to that meeting to quit or just asked to take a break. And now, if we'd have been smart, we'd have just stopped touring and made records. But we're never known for being smart. And so we got to the meeting, and Dean basically said, I don't want to do this. And there was talk about using another drummer live or whatever, but it just never felt right. And it's so we were on we took like a 16-year break.
A long break.
Yeah, a long break. Yeah, during that time, so much more I should have done. But, yeah.
Joe talked about that, how like Dean was the first to say it, but everyone was kind of thinking it.
Everyone was definitely thinking it because of Stodie's Extra Stout, not a great album. I don't think I showed up for much of it. And in a way, you're ripping off fans when you're doing that.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
And that felt bad, and everybody had, it was just, we needed a break, and nobody knew how to say it because we're not good at saying these things.
Right.
That's the line like, no, things got so bad, somebody almost said something. And so, but it was rough on Dave because Dave didn't know. He thought we were just going to just keep doing this. To him, it's weird. For as talented of a guy was, as much as he loved music, he saw it as a job. He saw it as this is like. He was actually, I think, at one point going to write a book about like the economics of it. But and I feel bad because I talked him out of that. I'm like, well, people will see us as a company, not as a. I kind of wish particularly after Amanda Palmer wrote her book about the economics of how she managed to make money doing what she does.
Sure.
I think that book would have been way ahead of its time. But and also, I mean, there aren't not a lot of musicians that were as smart as he was that could have written that kind of thing. So
yeah,
but he didn't. He was really bummed about that because we were all like, he didn't know. I think we were in a car headed somewhere because we were using cars, I think, for that one tour. And he was like, well, when we get around, we're like, Joe and I are like, well, we're not going to replace this. This is like the last time out. I didn't think he saw that coming. So.
Oh, because you had the meeting and you knew we were going to break up?
Well, we knew. Joe and I knew. But I think Dave just thought, well, I think you're going to talk about maybe, using a live drummer and having Dean play on records. But we were just like, oh, why do this? And not only that, at this point, I mean, the shows weren't that great and you burn out quickly from it. Yeah,
and changing labels and like
there was again, you get these sort of bubbles that burst. So at one time there was Chris Conley, who was in Revolting Cocks, writes about it in his book. There was a lot of money in underground music at one point. Sounds weird for underground music, but you were playing bigger places, bigger festivals, and around the time of like hair metal and rap and was getting big and stuff, that bubble kind of burst and that went away.
Yeah,
or the Nirvana bubble. Nirvana killed my career is the line. There's a guy on TV uses. So.
Would you remember where you were when you heard about Dave?
I was at work and I thought he pulled it. I thought it was a joke. I was.
Oh my god!
I saw it on CNN because I think I wasn't answering emails or anything. We were all still getting along, and actually, we would all go to the media. Our reunion shows were going to the media flea market. So sometimes all four of us would be there all together. Going around shopping, and people like. That's the Dead Milkmen, but they're not together. They're just looking for bargains at and it made them sad, but it made them wonderfully sad. Yeah. So I was at work. I was working for a pharmaceutical company, again in IT, and I saw it was on CNN. It was on the CNN website,
Wow.
and I thought David faked his death because I wasn't answering mail or phone that day, and I thought, oh, that's brilliant. That is the best fake death ever.
Best prank ever.
Kudos to you. Yeah, because they've been pranking people forever. Yeah. I've never seen the body. For all I know, he is probably still alive somewhere.
The ultimate prank.
Yeah, I had to write we had to write like a bio of the band one time, and I actually said he was still alive, living in Serbia. With like, what was it, like two children and 16 wives or something?
In November of that year, you played the reunion, like the charity show at the Troc, right? Like after he passed.
Yeah, we played two of them, and there was he gave his money to an orphanage in Serbia. Wow. It was one of the charities. And first, they didn't want the money because he had committed suicide, and it's the orphanage was run by a group of monks. And I guess, like, oh, we can't take money from a suicide. But then they found out how much money we raised.
Yeah.
And I think the orphans probably live better than I do. Like, they probably had like Xbox. I mean, we raised a lot of money.
Yeah.
The Troc, they were fantastic. Everybody volunteered their time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I still hear about things these days where somebody will play a benefit and they expect to be paid. I'm like, I don't understand that.
Right.
Like,
right. That's
come
not
on,
a benefit.
come on. The sick guy gets his name on the poster. Damn it. That's my friend Rob's joke. Whenever he hears about somebody getting paid for a benefit, he's like, come on, why don't we get paid? This sick guy gets his name on the poster.
Let's talk about Burn, Witch, Burn.
Yeah.
So when did you start this project?
I started it when I was in the Milkmen because I was just not having fun in the Milkmen. And I didn't know my wife could sing and play violin when I met her and married her. Yeah. So that was like a Superman moment. Like Clark Kent takes off the hat and glasses. And we were at a picnic and we ran into my friend Wild Bill, who was a musical genius. Could play everything. He grew up on Cape Breton Island. So he played like bouzouki, mandolin. I've been listening to, at that point, music was, again, we talked earlier about when one thing is dying and another thing is coming up.
Yeah.
So grunge and that, which I've never been really interested in, that was kind of dying. But when stuff like that falls apart, people don't know what to do. So all these fissures happen. So we begin to get bands like Rasputina, who I love. Three women playing cello. You begin to get all these like, you got the Dresden Dolls. So there was weird instrumentation and stuff. I really enjoy Irish music and gypsy music. So I thought, well, let's do that. And that's how that band came about. But again, it was just experimental. It's just
Gothic Pogue style.
Yeah, Gothic country. Yeah. The idea of the sort of American Gothic Flannery O'Connor sort of, yeah. I love that band so much.
I saw him once, yeah.
I've seen him a bunch of times. Yeah. We wanted to play a show with him, but Laura couldn't do the thing at the last minute, and I was really, really bummed. It was going to be a show up in New York, but she had some issues that she couldn't play it. And I was like, no, my one chance to play with Rasputina just flew out the window.
But you still have the chance, or did they break up?
No, they didn't break up. I should open that door again. I think she's absolutely amazing. Live, the stuff she says in between songs is hilarious. She was talking at one point about how everybody in her neighborhood, she was living in Brooklyn at that time, and they were all very recycling conscious and everything, and they were telling her that she should have a home birth. And she's like, but I showed them. I had a home cesarean. and later on, she goes to play this instrument. She goes, I'm not very good. It's like this banjolin thing. She's like, I'm not very good at playing this, so I'm a little bit nervous. But not as nervous as I was when I had my home cesarean. You're like, oh. Yeah, Rasputina is, I'm so glad they exist. My friend Woman had played, I think, in Rasputina for a bit. Yeah.
You like we talked about earlier, Gothic music, industrial music.
Yeah.
I'm going to name some of my favorite projects, and let's see if you like them too.
Okay.
Or would you, VNV Nation.
I just saw VMV. I've seen VMV a bunch of times. I just saw VMV at the Spaghetti Transfer is what we call it. It's a union transfer, but it used to be a spaghetti warehouse. Oh, yeah. I've seen them. They were, when I first got back into playing, I was at a VMV show and I was watching. If you watch what I do on stage, my movements, they're just copied from Ronan from VMV Nation. And somebody actually, we were playing a show in like Kansas City, and VMV had been there a week before. The guy who ran the venue was like, there's a band here, and this guy moved, and I'm like, yeah, I saw them, and I thought, if I go back at this, what should my stage persona be? How should I? And I thought, he never stops moving. He never. So if you see me, that's why I never stopped moving. I lifted it whole from him, and we cover Control, which is a lot of fun. So I really, and they're very positive. Yeah. And they have the song Illusion, which will just snap your heart, which is all about Sophie Lancaster, who was stomped to death. It's a horrifying thing.
I don't know that story.
Oh, so there's a young lady named Sophie Lancaster. This is about 10 years ago, maybe more that it happened, probably more than that. Probably be close to in her 30s now, but she was in her 20s. She was a goth in somewhere in England. I'm trying to remember exactly where, but her and her boyfriend were these goth weirdos, and they were at a park, like a local park, and a bunch of I don't want to say heavy metal kids, but a bunch of like hard rocking type guys stomped her and her boyfriend. He survived, but she went into a coma and died. And her mother, instead of basically demanding that the UK bring back the death penalty, she started the Sophie Lancaster Foundation, which teaches young people that you shouldn't be accepting of people who are different. And I think that's a great honoring of her legacy, which is from everything I've heard about her, that's what she would have wanted. But they their song, there's a heartbreaking. Somebody made animation of what happened to her, and they set it to Illusion. And wow. I dare you. It's like Sage Francis's Make 'Em Purr. I dare you to make it through that without weeping. So yeah.
I love their literary references. They have that one song where he referenced Julius Caesar.
Yeah.
That, and I started the podcast referencing that same speech, the Mark Anthony speech.
Oh wow.
So anyway, that, and I also love VNV's Nation's chord structure of their synth chords.
Everything that they do is and it's weird because they use an access virus. I actually knew a guy who my friend Gabriel played on tour with them.
Oh wow!
And we would have discussions because that's actually how I met him. We did Control one night, like out in the West Coast, and he was there, and he's like, "Hey, you came up after the show, so you played my part. I play live." I'm like, "What?" And you play, yeah. The stuff is really, and I don't know if Ronan actually has a lot of musical background or if he just took to the equipment and it was every now and then that happens when somebody just bonds with something. Sort of like Daniel Ash with the way he plays guitar is not the way most people play guitar, but it's perfect. So that's cool. I'm and again, they're super positive. The new album is really good. So
what about Switchblade Symphony?
I don't know a lot about them. They used to be always around in the day. I think I think I played a song by them recently. Did they have the song Rain? I can't remember. They have Rain. Rain keeps falling on down.
Yeah, that's them.
There we go. For those of you, somebody should sample me that and put that Rodney sings Switchblade Symphony. They were good. I remember
San Francisco band, I think.
They were They were around a lot. They were, try to remember the other band that was always like that. We probably mentioned them, but there's always a band I think of in the same breath with them.
What about Wumpscut?
Wumpscut are just hilariously fun.
Yeah.
I don't think they've made a great record in a while, but the earlier stuff was a lot of fun. And you still hear people play them in clubs. But it began, I think for them, they got trapped in where they couldn't really expand. That happens a lot of industrial and goth bands.
Yeah, because
you can't even change your hair. You know what I mean?
To cross over, it had to be the Nine Inch Nails with the hooks and like the pop.
Yeah, the Crux Shadows is the band I always think of in the same sort of vein for some reason, as
Switchblade Symphony.
The Switchblade Symphony, yeah.
How about Combi Christ?
I love early Combi Christ. Not so much now. Actually played my friend Bill, who we talked about earlier. Him and I played a set with the guitars from Combi Christ. I happened to walk into Fergie's at one point, and Bill was just playing Fergie. He's like, I'm playing today with this guy. I'm like, Bill, that's the guitarist for Combi Christ.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I heard he was in a band. Bill's just like outside of all that. I'm like, yeah. So he's like, "What? Come up and do a song with us?" I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah.
Skinny Puppy.
Skinny Puppy, I love. I just saw Skinny Puppy live on the, I think it was called the I versus I tour. V&B were supposed to be part of that originally. Wound up being them in front 242. And that's where the saying came from that we use in Philly all the time, which is get there early to see Youth Code. Because Youth Code were like the first band on the bill. And everybody kept saying, get there early to see Youth Code. So for months after that, no matter what the show was, you're going to want to get there early to see Youth Code. Yeah, Skinny Puppy and my friend Stephanie is a huge Skinny Puppy fan. Like she's seen them, I think, like every show that every time they've come through, she's been there. So yeah, and that show was great because it was based on Fukushima. So they have that. There's that interesting element that they have of theatricality, which is and everybody in that band has like their assigned role and they do it well, which is awesome. Yeah.
And they kind of were one of the first older bands to.
They grew out of like a. It's weird if you hear the band that they've been in before out of Vancouver. It was a very like poppy sort of synth type band, and they began to. I think they again latching to the equipment when they began to hear these Mirage samplers and oh wow I can do this with that. Yeah.
It's like Ministry every day's Halloween to Stigmata.
Right.
That transition.
Or even Ministry before that because they had originally tried to sell, and I heavily recommend the Chris Connolly book. they originally tried to sell Al Jorgensen as sort of like Boy George. And which is weird. Also, he was dating Amy Mann. I have so many questions.
Al Jorgensen?
Yeah, I actually just saw, for the first time I saw Ministry a couple weeks ago. My friend Patrick was like, hey, I've got tickets to see Ministry. You want to see him? I'm like, let me think. Yes. And I went to see him, and the show was amazing because they did a bunch of new stuff first, about 45 minutes worth. So you lose a lot of the audience.
Right.
And so people were leaving, and then they came back on stage after they were done, and they did all the hits, like 45, except for Every Day is Halloween. They did 45 minutes of the hits. So it was a great show.
Al Jorgensen's brother is a teacher down in Florida, and I'm actually going to do a workshop at his school next week.
Oh, really?
Isn't that crazy?
I didn't even know he had a brother. I would have so many questions for him.
He's got some crazy stories about his brother.
I bet he does. Yeah, he better.
Okay, so so KMFDM. Are you a fan?
Yeah, KMFDM, again, another great band that I loved. I've seen them live fairly recently. Another band I wish that they do interesting stuff. I wish they would do bit more interesting stuff, but I'm not going to put them down because Megalomaniac, stuff like that is just absolute genius.
Juke Joint Jezebel.
Juke Joint Jezebel. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Help us, save us, put us away. Money, power.
What about? Let's see. Did you ever listen to Bile? You know that industrial band?
Yes, Bile are fantastic. Actually, Remove the Head by my friend Rickett. He played in a version of Bile, like a touring version. Remove the Head is such a great song.
I'm getting
Remove the Head.
Christoph is going to be on the podcast.
What? Oh God, he's my friend. Yeah,
he was on He came to my last show in Brooklyn.
Right. Okay, ask Christoph about the time he was hanging out here.
Okay,
and his wife Laura and my wife started drinking around 7 at night. And they were still drinking and laughing at like 7 a.m. Christoph and I were like, the hell with this, go to sleep. He's crashed out on the couch. I go upstairs. And I think it was like long past the sun. Yeah, he is super great guy, super nice. His current project, Distorted Retrospect, absolutely amazing. And live, he kills it. I saw him live. I saw Das Eek. He opened for Das Eek, and I thought, man, I feel bad for Das Eek because following this guy ain't going to be easy.
No, he's an amazing performer.
Yeah, really good. I'm so glad you're interviewing him. He's going to be awesome.
He's on Lars Attacks, the song Judas Priest.
I didn't know that.
And that song is based on Golgotha by Wumpscut.
Well, he was in the audience tonight. I went and saw you. I was going to point him out. I should have probably done that. I didn't know he was, because we all went to see, it was you and Mega Ran, and he came with us. So we were all bouncing around the city that night from show to show. I forget who he was going to go see somewhere, and so we went there, and they went there, and then popped back and did that. So it was a night of bouncing around the city to see bands.
You are connected. So we could keep naming all these bands, but it's interesting how
I call it the DMCU. It's like the Marvel comic universe, it's a DMCU, and because everybody is interconnected, and you can draw these lines to so and so. And then sometimes it's great because somebody you'll introduce somebody, but the person you're introducing them to has known them for 10 years. Like, oh yeah, I know him.
Yeah, so, right. We were all connected between genres, but that also, Rodney, is because you love so much music. You're just a fan of music. You're not stuck in one thing.
You shouldn't be stuck in one thing because I always I would hear stories about David Bowie would just turn up, in these little clubs in when he in New York and stuff. And look, he did it before, also in England. Like, oh look, it's David Bowie. I always think that's the way to be.
That's you. You're the David Bowie of Philadelphia.
I try to be the David. Yeah, I'm without the talent and the intelligence of David Bowie, but I do have the David. I have the David Bowie Is app on my phone, which I heavily recommend. That's a great app. You have David Bowie in your house.
That's right. Yeah. We went to his exhibit at the Brooklyn Museum.
I went too. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, I have that poster in the other room.
Is the app based on the exhibit?
It's based on the exhibit, and it's augmented reality. So you have it's good. Cool. Yeah, although it makes your phone, at least my phone, makes my phone heat up a lot. It might be Bowie's spirit is trapped in there. When I saw that, because again, we were talking about how the Berlin trilogy really influenced me when I was younger, and they had Synthy. The EMS synth that they used.
Oh, wow.
And so Vienna's going around, and I'm staring at it. And Vienna came back, and she's like, are you going to move? And I'm like, what? She goes, you've been looking at this thing for 20 minutes. I'm like, oh, that's and I feel bad for other people. Yeah. Or maybe they didn't care about the synth or whatever, but I was just standing there like, oh. Because you don't think you're going to see this stuff.
Right.
And they had TVC15. They had the Poodle from when he did that on Saturday Night Live. Again, now when you talk to young people, they're used to like Lady Gaga or they're used to Miley Cyrus, people being outrageous, but there was nothing like that when I was younger. So we were watching, I'm in my mid to late teens or whatever, and probably mid-teens, and we got Saturday Night Live on. Bowie's going to be on. We're psyched, and there he is in a dress, and they've got this remote control dog, and like it was life-changing. It was like, wow, you can actually make something very visual and very different.
Yeah,
which I thought was great. And I never thought I'd never see that. So just seeing like, and I knew because I sort of peeked ahead. I looked online, and I knew that the remote control poodle was going to be part of the show, but I was just like still like, wow, that's cool.
Yeah. Is the exhibit traveling, or was it like a one-time thing?
They took it everywhere. It started at the Victoria and Albert, I think, and he was still alive when it started.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
wow.
so and he died partway through, but for the Brooklyn exhibit, they had lots of stuff they couldn't get, so they had stuff from Philadelphia because he worked here at Sigma Sound, yeah, and so they had they would get that one and also stuff because he lived in New York City. So they had even more stuff at the Brooklyn one than they had at the other. But they took that. It was in Chicago. They took it all over the world. I was jealous when people I knew saw it in Chicago. I took a day off work, and Vienna and I took the train up to New York, and we kept hitting. We had the tickets, the Lightning Bolt tickets, because Dean had told us to do this.
Right.
So we got to go around, but we were there so early there was no line anyway. So we got to rush in, and then we went down. We had drinks, and Vienna had a Fame. Or a couple of those, they had Bowie-influenced cocktails in the bar at the Brooklyn Museum, and I wanted her to get and drink a bunch of the Fames so I could go Fame, and I drank a couple of Thin White Dukes, which were really good, yeah, because you have to do that. You had to. I had like for dinner, they had these dinners with ridiculous things. Like I had the Diamond Dogfish and chips, and you have to give into it.
Bowie,
be silly, yeah. Bowie would have laughed.
You have always had good cultural recommendations, and you have a radio show. Rodney Anonymous tells you how to live through Why Not Radio, right?
Yep. Why not? Yep.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah, legally, I'm sure we can. Yeah, I don't think there's any injunctions against me talking about it.
How long have you been doing that?
Oh my God! You know what? I got to be coming up on. I think I started it in like 2004, maybe.
Wow.
Maybe a little bit later. Maybe 2014. Maybe I'm off by a few years. Yeah, I've been doing it. I think I had like a 7-year. I got to check in. I don't know. I started doing it whatever year APOC came out by Vardensphere. Because I remember it all linked around the same time. And Vardensphere's APOC, by the way, I claim is sort of the spiritual father of Pretty People. But so yeah, I got that because we went and did the band was back together obviously, and we went to this radio station. Why not? We did this on air thing, and they said I was just talking. They said, "Hey, do you want a radio show?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." Who says no? And then I don't know. They thought it probably going to be punk, and which I consider stuff I played punk. Yeah. But I was like, well, and it's going to be this dark, Then so I get to play a lot of music. I wouldn't say I get to play music by my friends. A lot of people became my friends later on, but if you're just playing music by your friends, that's kind of weird. So, but it's just weird. Occasionally I'll play something and I'll know the person, which is odd for me. But I played your stuff there because I did a whole thing about robots one time. I did a whole set of robot songs.
That's awesome.
And the next one, now and then I'll do like a theme show. The next one I'm doing is obscure bands from the early 80s. So it's going to be like Nervous Gender. There's a band in Philly called Crash Course in Science that were fantastic. Experimental Products were great. Executive Slack. So I'm scooping up a bunch of weird stuff from the early 80s. And there's a band I just discovered called Slime because I was on Bandcamp. Bandcamp's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I saw this thing for it was like No Wave section.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, No Wave. And there's a band called Slime, and they have a song called Dial-Up Internet is the purest form of internet. I'm like, how can you not? It's like $1 to download that. Who doesn't want that?
That's good.
And it is everything. The B-side is called Male Pattern Baldness. So like, who doesn't want, who says no?
How would you define the original No Wave movement?
The original No Wave, I think it was out of boredom. There's a band called the Stickmen. The original No Wave was just, again, it was pre-punk in a way. And it was just people who had moved to the city who were doing weird art stuff. And again, because there were no bands that would play a house party or whatever, they, okay, well, we need entertainment. We're having a party. We need entertainment. Well, I have a saxophone. I have drums. And that's how these bands all came about. And then eventually they would find places to let them play.
Yeah. Like, I remember seeing King Missile in like '98. That his kick drum was like a cardboard box, and
Yeah.
someone was playing like a violin. Like
Yeah.
that King Missile to me always kind of felt like part of that movement.
Yeah, I think they're definitely influenced by No Wave. Here in Philly, we were lucky. There's a band called the Stickmen that Joe and I worshipped.
Yeah.
And I still worship to this day. And I was lucky. I got to play the young lady was, like I say, lucky because it was a benefit for her because she got cancer. But we played another project I did played a benefit for her. And I actually got to play like a hurdy-gurdy at it and everything and do my impersonation of the singer for the Stickmen. But the Stickmen really made us want to be in a band. They were just so bizarre and so out there and so different than everything else. And they were sort of no wave. The no wave stuff is absolutely amazing because it's skewing everything. You know?
Yeah. Would you think? But would a band like I Instruzan Zende Newbouten be like that? Like
that's a good question. Is that weird noise?
Or Throbbing Gristle?
Throbbing Gristle is, they consider themselves in sort of first industrial. And I love Throbbing Gristle.
Yeah.
And fascinated by Throbbing Gristle and collect Throbbing Gristle stories. And I would love to meet Cozy Fanny Tootie. I bet she'd be, and she has a book out I need to read. I don't usually read rock and roll books. But, that's on that great cusp, because we're talking about the cusp of when, sort of stuff is dying away and people are coming up with interesting stuff. That would be in a way a no wave band. They probably didn't consider themselves, but that's that whole thing of, look, we got here's a guitar that's missing 4 or 5 strings. Like I guess the B-52s in a way started that way. Again, it was just house party stuff, and these bands just started it to do that. And then people were like, well, we should just take this around. But none of those people ever expected to get famous.
Right,
Stride and Neubauten were amazing because of just the sort of transgressive nature. At one point, they were playing, I can't remember, the Marquee in the UK, and they found out that the club sits above a tube station. And I mean, it sits like 60 feet above the tube station. But they decided to try to go through the club's floor into the tube station. So they got like jackhammers on stage that night. And we're like, the security's running on stage, like trying to pull them off the jackhammers. Right. Yeah, I don't think they would have been successful in reaching if the Nazis couldn't hit the tube station with a bomb, you're probably not going to reach it with a jackhammer.
I remember they had the album Tabula Rasa. Yeah. Right. And
I think that has You Will Find Me in the Garden. Yeah.
That was my introduction to them.
They are absolutely
but
amazing.
That's a more pop sensible record, I guess, than what they were known for, which was using actual machinery on stage, right? Yeah.
Which is great. I always tell people that. My first real instrument was like a metal detector. I realized I could go, and
that's tight.
I should have stuck with it. If I was a kid, I would have been like, I figured this out when I was like 10 or something, and I thought, there's a beat that you can get out of this. It goes like, bip, bip, bip. But it was also like a little drum machine. It would go, bip, bip, bip. And I thought, if I'd been smart, I would have just made something out of it. I tried later on to make a synthesizer because I had I was interested in electronics and stuff, and I needed a keyboard. And the girl that lived down the street provided me with one. She got a little organ thing that I tore, and then I found out later on that she'd stolen it from a church, from this weird holy roller church. And then I wouldn't turn her in because I think they wound up preaching a sermon against my family.
Maybe she put it under her dress like she was pregnant.
I think somebody broke into the church and it was gone. So I put it together later on because the cops are asking kids because they figure it's kids, and they're like, "Do you know anything about a missing organ?" I'm like, "That's funny. I just got one of these."
She's the original organ donor.
There we go, organ donor. Yep.
Hey, Okay, so what is your creative plans this year other than working on a song with me for the Edgar Allan Poe LP?
Oh, there you go.
What are you working on?
I'm working on I have a thing called Seventh Victim that I got into only because my friend Stephen Archer, who did the artwork for a mutual friend of ours' album, he had I was backstage again. I think it was backstage at VMV maybe, or it might have been something else. Now, this might have been backstage at Velvet Acid Christ playing with the birthday party. But Stephen was giving me crap for never having a thing. Like everybody else, every other band person has a thing. They have a separate thing. I never really have a separate thing. And
what is it? A solo project?
Yeah, it was a solo thing. And he said, okay. And I said, yeah, well, maybe I'll get a thing. And so Stephen left the room, came back and goes, next month you're opening for me in Delaware. So I had a month to build a system.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's the sort of genesis of what I was doing. So I wound up getting these Korg. I have a Korg sampler, and I used to play FM synth, and those kind of disappeared. And Cord put out a smaller one, and I was playing around with that, and Vienna heard it. She goes, "That's the first thing I've ever heard you do. It sounds like you. It sounds like the stuff that I imagine, or she imagined was in my head, sort of stuff." So I did that, and it was kind of iffy because I was still figuring it all out. And basically, what I have now is the system I had in the '90s. I have it's not the same equipment, but it replicates that. So I have basically a drum machine. I have a couple of synth modules, and I use the laptop to do a lot of the sounds. And then I can trigger samples. I used to have the heavy sampler, and so that's kind of what I do now, and I enjoy playing around with it. Today, before you came here, I was just working around with it, and so the whole idea originally was just me, just in the band, and that was going to be anybody else. And then a friend of mine was having he has these nights where he has covers. And so my friend Dane and I had a thing, Children of Pompeii, named after our late Freddie Pompeii, who we could do a whole podcast about Freddie Pompeii, but Dana got pregnant, and so she couldn't do the that anymore. So I was just kind of off doing this stuff on my own. And when we did that together, I would play like a keytar, which the Elise is wireless. You can go anywhere with it. It's great. And so we would do like Hendrix covers. We played a night of Hendrix covers. We played like 3 Hendrix covers as a goth way goths would do it.
Right.
And we didn't break character. We kept telling people that we worked at Hot Topic, and our manager let us have the night off. And we thought we were going to get killed. We go to the show, and we figure nobody's going to be here for this. It's Hendrix cover night. So we go across the street, we're eating, we come back, and the place is packed. And we're like, we're going to die. We're going to get up. And fortunately, people liked it. So I wound up, that project had to fold. And then I wound up with, I just had my own little thing, and I needed a name, and Seventh Victim was on TV. All right, so getting to the crux of the story. So my friend, John Cecil Price, would put these nights together of covers. And he had Van Halen cover night. And I don't know a lot about Van Halen, so I was like, "Oh, let me do this." And I was trying to think, what can I do? I got like the short end straw, which is Jamie's Crying, because I wanted to do Why Can't This Be Love? Because that's the worst lyric in the world, which is only time will tell if we will stand the test of time, which is just horrible, right? But like, everybody else wanted that. Like, so Gibbous Mooner playing this thing. It was a great night. There was a guy who had all his home built stuff, MIDI triggers that were using shoes and steering wheels. It turned out to be a wonderful night. But so I only have one song. So I thought, what can I do with this? And I was like, well, maybe if I have like someone like an invocation. And I happened to luck out, and I found a young lady on the web named Orly Stewart, who is a Wiccan. And she was doing this invocation of Lilith. So, okay, now I've got this, and I've reworked the song. So I've got something tied together, this sample of her that runs through it, in and out. But it's still got, and I thought, I can't sing this because it's not, first of all, the song is not good. And then I thought, if I have a woman sing it, it's better. So I just put a thing out on Facebook, and I said, are you kind of spooky and witchy? Can you sing near or in the key of E flat? And fortunately for me, my friend, my friend and member of the band, Janet, answered it. And she has turned out to be amazing. She is super talented, and she's a super hard worker. And that to me is, Janet will never cancel practice. She's always there. And she puts in 110%. And the weird thing is we can't play Friday. This is how slow I am on the uptake. She's Orthodox, so we can't play Friday nights.
Right.
So she gave me this calendar at one point, and she's like, well, here, because it has all the major holidays and all this.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, why are you giving me a Jewish calendar? Oh, like I never put together her hair wrap and everything. Yeah. I'm like, and I just thought it was her look. I'm like, oh, okay, now that makes sense to me. But so sometimes I do the shows by myself if it's a Friday night or something she can't do because it's a high holy holiday. But she is absolutely amazing. I had her doing a percussion thing the other day, and she freaking nailed it. So I was like, oh, I got to have more percussion and stuff. So that's what I do now, and that's where my focus.
And
I
what are you calling your project?
Well, it's called Seventh Victim only because it happened to be what was on TV at the time. Turner Classic Movies was showing Seventh Victim. I was like, I need a name. So I occasionally take band names from movies.
So you're doing live shows?
Yeah, live shows. Yeah, I've done a couple of them. My first live show I got when it was just me, before Janet was in the band, was opening for My Life with a Thrill Kill Call.
Wow.
Which was a sold-out show.
Wow.
That's Trial by Fire. And
how'd that go?
It went great, but it went great because, first of all, I got this thing, and I wrote back, and I said, the guy asked me, I'm like, wow, thank you. I'm glad you like the music I'm doing. He's like, I haven't heard anything you're doing. I just hear your stuff that's in a little area. They don't want to break down.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, well, I'll take the show. However,
Right.
I work out the set, half hour, goes really well. I'm really happy with it. All the equipment fires and, because you can always get a misfire with that.
Yeah.
And everything goes fine. I come off stage. I'm super happy. And I go backstage. And now they said, you have to be on 8:30 off by 9. No, don't go any longer. No, I got this worked out perfect. I go I take everything backstage, and there's Groovy Man, but there's nobody else from Philco called. So I'm like, where's the rest of your band? He's like, oh, they went to the hotel. I'm like, where's the hotel? He's like, it's by the airport. I'm like, okay, we're nowhere near the airport. Like, my house is in South Philly, where we are, and we're still far away from the airport. So they were like an hour late or so, probably more, getting back. So there was this big gap.
You could have played longer.
Yeah. I could have. Yeah. Well, I don't think I had enough material.
Right,
I was like,
a
lot of it was like, one of the songs actually wound up on the thing on Bandcamp is a song where I worked it out just so I could leave the stage, walk off, and say, look, I'm getting paid to play a half hour. That means I got to be on stage for a half hour. I would go get a beer, come back.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So weird, yeah.
Was Thrill Kill Cult's show good?
It was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was. They didn't like it, and I'm like, how could you not? Everybody who was there, they nailed it that night.
Yeah.
They did "Would You Fear for You? Do You Fear for Your Child?" That sounded fantastic.
Yeah.
They hit everything perfect.
Well,
we talk forever.
We'll spread the word. Yeah, this is good. This is the longest podcast.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think now if we'll divide it into two, but maybe we won't. We'll just do an epic one.
People always have to do that with me. I got to divide it into two parts, so I get talking.
That's good. Well,
that's because when I was young, I would read like Rolling Stone. They would just say the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about the new album. I double tracked that guitar with a 12 string. We're going to play Europe. I used to read, no.
What are you? Twitter's Rodney Anonymous?
Yeah, it's Rodney. I think it's Rodney Anon or something.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
Are you on Instagram?
I am on Instagram. I love Instagram. Instagram is great because it's like social media without Nazis.
Joe says something very similar.
What?
That he loves Instagram.
Yeah, Instagram's perfect for Joe because nobody gets in a fight over Instagram. It's just you make the person go away.
Post it, keep it moving.
Yeah, there you go.
And your Bandcamp is the Seventh Victim.
It's just Seventh Victim. You can find us. There's another band called Seventh Victim from the UK that we found out about. So I want to write them and say, hi, we're your American cousins. But if you get them, you'll like them too. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, buddy. This
Thank you
good.
very much. I enjoyed the heck. I almost cursed the heck out of this.
Chill.
Yeah.
Who's that rapping on my chamber door, mister? All up in my grill like nevermore.
We got EAP in the house tonight. Edgar Allan Poe, America's favorite anti-transcendentalist. We're taking this back, way back, 19th century style. Who's that? Who's that rapping? Who's that rapping at my chamber door? Mr. Raven, all up in my grill with the nevermore.
It's MC Lars and the Dead Milkmen. I'm rapping with some legends of punk rock. Yo, Rodney Anonymous. Let's flow like Poe. Here we go. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I kicked it, weekend weary, dark and cold, just like Lake Erie. Milkmen remix, someone clear me. While I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping up like what? This thunder clapping, stopping like the devil or a parish chaplain. I dropped my Lovecraft on the floor like Arthur Gordon Pym on a distant shore. Open the window, let the fire escape. Man in the alley, black hat and cape. 20-pound bird lands on my sill. Cold feet, cold eyes gives me a chill. Grim face, grim stare, death carnivore. Quote that raven, nevermore. Who's that? Who's that rapping? Who's that rapping at my chamber door? Mr. Raven, all up in my grill with the nevermore. Who's that? Who's that rapping? Who's that rapping at my chamber door? Mr. Raven, Corvus, Corax, come to sell the store. I miss Lenore, my Annabelle Lee, taken by angels from me, along with books. Hey, that's me, harbinger of death, visiting me. I said, can I help you, evil prophet? If you got a problem, look, I'll solve it. He checked my hook, DJ revolved it, perched on palace, chalice, drop it. Tell me, sir, please, if you can, am I a good or evil man? What can I say? What can I do? When will I be rid of you? Nevermore, quoth he at me, hating on this poor MC. Satanic raven, Nietzsche glee, screaming at me like Gordon Ramsay. I jumped into my El Dorado and checked my cask of Amontillado. Call a nurse. verse, disperse my thirst, put this process in reverse. Wish I'd had some warning first. MC Lars, 88 Hearst. Now I'll never ever be Sage Francis. While on my grave this blackbird dances.
The raven's eyes still have the seeming of a demon that is dreaming. Lamplight over him still screaming. Hear me screaming. My soul still goes there on that floor and shall be lifted nevermore.
Afflicted calm scratched up my door. Canonized peace, U.S. folklore.
Who's that? Who's that rapping? Who's that rapping at my chamber door? Mr. Raven, all up in my grill with the nevermore. Who's that? Who's that rapping? Who's that rapping at my chamber door? Mr. Raven, Corvus, Corax, can you settle the score? Who's that? Who's that rapping? Who's that rapping at my chamber door? Mr. Raven, all up in my face with the nevermore. Who's that? Who's that rapping? Who's that rapping at my chamber door? Mr. Raven found dead in the streets of Baltimore. Whose house? Raven's house.
That's right. It goes, whose house?
Raven's house.
Whose house? Everyone. Raven's house. Whose house? Ooh. Raven's house. I want to say big ups to the Dead Milkmen for keeping punk rock funny and fun. Thanks for being on my EP. Much love to the Philadelphia homies. I'm MC Lars, saying that school can be fun, education is fresh, and Edgar Allan Poe is the man. Peace. That was Mr. Raven, the 2012 revisitation with the Dead Milkmen from the Edgar Allan Poe EP. Great interview with Rodney. Thank you, Rodney. I love you, buddy. It's great catching up, and thank you for your hospitality. Next week, we have Rob Piccinini Jr., because some of you may know I have a show coming up with Big D and the Kids Table where I'm playing a lot of the Robot Kill stuff, and they're doing the 10-year anniversary of their album at Brighton Music Hall, June 8th. So the Monday before that is my interview with Rob. So be sure to check that out, June 3rd. He was my original bass player. We toured England 3 times. He recorded on some tracks. He has a bunch of cool bands in Jersey, and we just talk about the early years of the Graduate era touring. So it was kind of nostalgic and dope. So anyway, thank you all for listening to the MC Lars podcast. Thank you for your support on Patreon. Please leave a review. Please tell a friend. And I hope to see you at one of the shows coming up this summer. All right. Thanks all. Bye.